Good evening and welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 263 Adesanya versus Vettori 2. I am your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Schillen. Keith is the executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, as well as the Sherdog Radio Network, where he is the creator of numerous shows, including the, I understand, recently retired MMA Past, Present, and Future, and, of course, the Schillen and Duffy Show, where he will take the captain's chair for the recaps. Keith, welcome to the show. How are you doing? And let me be the first to find out what is coming in place of MMA Past, Present, and Future.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, man. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing really well.
I'm glad to be breaking down a fantastic card. So I wanted to retire MMA Past, Present, and Future simply because nothing retires early in MMA. So, you know, let it go out on top. But no, basically, it just came down to I'm trying to think what the word I'm looking for. It's tough to get three things and waiting on one guy to fit this one in. And I said, you know what? Some guys I want to go deeper in, some I don't. Not to be held down with a set structure where I got to get a prospect now. So what I did do is I'm actually kicking off two shows, and they're both kind of spinoffs of MMA Past, Present, and Future. So if you like that show, I think you'll like the concept. The first show is, I'm calling it MMA Legacy. So it's going to be very similar to the past part of MMA Past, Present, Future. And I'm just digging in with sorry, as my dog barks, I apologize. This is what we do when we go live. As the first show I kicked off, I did Jorge Gracie. I went like an hour. We talk about the growing up of Gracie and why did Hickson not fight Randy Couture and Sakuraba, and we got into how UFC started and what he's doing now, and all these really deep. So it's definitely a niche show. Like, not everyone's gonna like it, but if you're into history, that's what that's gonna be. But the other show that I did that I might be even more excited about is, when someone's asking questions on Fighter and they go, I don't mean to get too personal. Well, this show is called Getting Too Personal. And it's simply like, I'm going to talk to you and nothing's off topic. So the first, and it's also not going to be, these shows aren't going to be set like, okay, every week. It's basically when I have a guest that I'm interested in and doing it with, that's what I'm going to do it with. So the first week I did Kale Harrison, and we hit every topic. We talked about MMA for about 3 minutes, and then we just talked about her life. Obviously the trial with her coach who was sexually assaulting her for 8 years. We talked about the depression after the Olympics. We talked about her being a mom now and adopting her niece and nephew. And it was really incredible. Incredible talking to someone like that. And I got that idea from the Jens Pulver interview I did, where I was going to do an interview with Jens Pulver. I was going to do your usual, which fighter did you wish you fought that you never did? And, all these questions. And I asked him how he's doing. And he just wants to talk about his dad, and we just rolled with that. And I feel very comfortable in a setting like that, based on my background for work. I get very personal with people, and it just would be a different show than anything that's out there. So,
and I mean, allow me to just say to anyone listening, obviously, you would expect me to be a booster for something coming out on Sherdog Radio since I work for Sherdog, but if you've not listened to at least the past segments of Keith's Past, Present, and Future series, I mean, I'm an old school fan. I was the fan for a long, long time before I worked in this space. And even fighters that I thought I knew all about, Keith has been able to draw out in a way that frankly surprised me. I did not expect to learn anything new about Sean Shirk in 2021. We're talking about a guy who hadn't fought in a decade and gave plenty of interviews during his time. I mean, I remember hearing him on the Sherdog Radio Network. And obviously Pulver was just unbelievable. Like, that guy has had his heart on his sleeve for 20 years and was very open about, the kind of tragedy that informed his upbringing. So for Keith to get new stuff out of these people on those topics, I consider those must-watch interviews. And again, it's what you would expect me to say sitting in this chair, but give him a try and definitely, give a listen to these new series. He's going to be Keith the Interrogator Schillen. I mean, that sounds less friendly than the interviews actually are, but he's good at getting new truths and new looks out of people. So very good stuff. Well, that's enough about us. Let's talk about UFC 263. In keeping with the UFC's, I feel as though their new pattern, their new normal since coming back from COVID, last May, is that every pay-per-view is loaded. Not everyone has multiple title fights on it. Obviously, there just aren't enough titles to do that. But this one does have multiple title fights, and it has a bit of everything. It has one of the most recognizable names to the casual fan in all of MMA in Nate Diaz. It has highly relevant fights pretty much all the way down the card. I mean, there are fights on the undercard here that aren't too far from being title eliminators. Here's just a throw out a question for you. Outside of the main card, and currently the main card is listed as just the top 5 fights, so Paul Craig versus Jamahal Hill on up. Which fight are you looking most forward to?
That's a great question, because
there's a right and wrong answer to this, by the way. So let's see what you got.
Well, I'm going to go with Brad Riddell and Drew Dober. That fight is, I'll throw it out there already. That's going to be my fight of the night pick. It's just a fantastic matchup between two of the best strikers in the UFC, two guys in the best weight class in the UFC. That one, but I mean, there's some other ones out there. Dawodu versus Evloev is a fight that I'm really interested in. I'm interested in the Calderwood in Lauren Murphy fight because of the title implications on it. The winner of that one's probably getting a title shot.
You could argue that both of these women might have deserved title shots without having to fight each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know what? Anders and Stewart was turned into a pretty good scrap the last time we saw it. So maybe that's another one I'm interested in.
Hey, and Anders versus Stewart kind of leads into the theme of UFC 263, because UFC 263 is night of the rematches. Obviously, we have rematches in the main and co-main events, both title fights. I'm sure that's a first in UFC history. Sherdog's Jay Petrie will let me know if I'm wrong about that. One of them is literally a title rematch. The other is a rematch of a fight 4 years ago, early in both men's careers. And then, of course, there's Anders and Stewart running it back after their first fight just a few months ago ended in a disappointing no contest. Unless you've got anything else in terms of general thoughts on this card, we got 14 fights to cover. So want to dive right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
First up at UFC 263, the UFC is getting the obligatory heavyweight slobber knocker out of the way right off the bat, as the only heavyweight fight on the card is the first one up. It is Carlos Felipe versus Jake Collier. Felipe, the 26-year-old Brazilian, is 10-1 overall. He's 2-1 since joining the UFC back in 2020 after a bit of a layoff. He most recently fought in January, taking a split decision over Justin Tafa at UFC on ABC 1. Prior to that, he took a unanimous decision over Yorgan De Castro at UFC on ESPN, Holm versus Aldana. And in his UFC debut, he lost a majority decision to Sergey Spivak. That would have been last July. He takes on Collier. Collier, the 32-year-old Missourian, is 12-5 overall. He is 3-4 in the UFC. However, that covers the gamut from middleweight to light heavyweight to heavyweight. Since coming back last July at heavyweight, he is 1-1. He got knocked out in just 45 seconds by Tom Aspinall last July, came back in December and took a unanimous decision over John Vellante. Odds on this one do slightly favor the Brazilian. He is -170, where you can get Collier at +150 as the slight underdog. I think I jumped to conclusions prematurely about Jake Collier. He came back after, I think it was close to 3 years off. He was literally 60 pounds heavier. Because he had been a shredded middleweight. He had been a very muscular light heavyweight. And he came back just weighing 264 pounds and just looking like he just literally put on 60 pounds of fat. I'm not trying to make fun of him, although I might have a little at the time. And then when he got blasted by Tom Aspinall, I was like, okay, this is a joke. He's going to lose 3 straight, get dropped by the UFC, and go back to whatever buffet he was living at for the last 3 years. I was premature. One, it turns out that Tom Aspinall is really, really good at fighting, and he's probably going to do that to a few more people before it's all said and done. Second, I mean, Jake Collier doesn't look bad at heavyweight. His body composition is different, but his gas tank is good enough to beat John Vellante. He's still a quick guy. He's still kind of light on his feet for just literally a blown up light heavyweight. Unfortunately, all I know about him right now is that he's worse than Tom Aspinall and better than John Vellante, and all but about 15 heavyweights in the world fall into that range. So this is actually a really good matchup. You know, you and I always kind of make fun of the obligatory unranked heavyweight fight that gets thrown on every card. This one's pretty good because while I've underrated Collier as a heavyweight, I think collectively we might have overrated Carlos Felipe a little bit as a prospect. Just anytime someone comes up, he's in his 20s, like he's not 35 like the average UFC heavyweight, and he's a real live big dude, you know, just has an actual heavyweight body. I think we just hope for them to be the next big thing. I don't know if that's the case. I mean, he had a good fight with Sergey Spivak. Turns out Sergey Spivak is a good heavyweight. He's a fringe contender. I don't know what to take out of him beating Yorgan De Castro and Justin Tafa. They're just not two of the better heavyweights. I mean, Yorgan De Castro's gone from the UFC. Justin Tafa he's constantly towing that line pretty much every time out. My concern with Felipe is his gas tank. Like, it takes a lot to have a bad gas tank in comparison to other heavyweights. He does. Collier, like I said, despite the fact that he doesn't look like he used to, still has pretty good gas. Based on that alone, despite the fact that Felipe is the favorite, I'm going to go with Collier here. I don't think Felipe is going to come out and blitz Collier in 45 seconds like Tom Aspinall did. So, I mean, I think Felipe basically has a round and a half to get it done. I'm not picking him to do that. So give me Jake Collier by decision.
I love your enthusiasm. Like if you're excited for this fight, you're definitely excited for this entire card. We do rag on the unranked heavyweights. I'm just happy that the UFC is making this fight be first and not on the main card, because somehow the UFC loves putting random unranked heavyweight matchup ahead of ranked fighters. And then, you know, not necessarily on pay-per-view nights, but a lot of times on fight nights, suddenly like third from the top is two unranked heavyweights. And then
it backfires because it's a lousy fight too.
Yeah.
It turns into a lousy fight.
Ponzinibbio is underneath it.
Yeah.
But it's funny because you're really excited for this matchup. And so am I. Like, I actually like this fight too. I think I'm a little higher on Carlos Felipe than you are. I'm actually higher on both these guys. Yeah, both these guys are, when I think of like fat, like tubby, they're not your Alistair Overeem ripped up heavyweights or your Andre Arlovski, you know, in shape heavyweights or what we think is in shape, what the stereotype of in shape is. That's not them. They're the, you know, totally dad bod, little past dad bod heavyweights. But I think they're better than you would think. I'll start with Felipe. I understand where you're going with his cardio, where he could fade, but I think that's because he has a pretty good output for a heavyweight, especially as you talked about early. His hands are deceivingly fast. He uses feints well. He does work behind a jab. He loves his overhand right. He kind of telegraphs it a little too much, but I like that he goes to the body. He has power at heavyweight because, you know, when you're 250 pounds, you're going to have power. But he isn't a heavyweight banger. Like he isn't a big, you know, when I think about the heavy hitters at heavyweight, he's not in the club. He's lining up in the line of we're sending him out. He does have a nice bob and weave style, thudding leg kicks. Haven't seen much with him on the ground. Probably a reason for that. Move over to Collier. Collier looks like a much, and, you know, obviously you talked about Aspinall smoking him, and I think that says more about Aspinall than Collier. But Collier looked much better in his last fight. He looks much better at heavyweight than he ever did in lower weight classes. For a heavyweight, he has high output. He has variety in his strikes. He mixes up going high, going low, busy jab. We saw in his last fight body kicks, a lot of calf kicks against John Vellante. He was digging. He was dipping to the left and digging to the body, which I like. Going to the lower portion, the liver shot, solid jab. And let's not forget, this guy's a former NCAA wrestler, so he can mix in some takedowns. So who am I going to pick? I'm going to go with Collier too. Like, we're both coming out the gate going with an upset. I just love the idea of a mediocre middleweight becoming somehow a serviceable heavyweight despite carrying an extra 50 or 60 pounds that's not needed. I think he's the faster fighter of these two. And not faster puncher, but faster just overall movement. And like I said, he still has that wrestling background. So if things aren't going on the feet, maybe he can get a takedown, and we can see what the Brazilian has on the ground. So give me Collier, and I'm going to say by decision.
There you go. 2 picks right out the gate for the slight underdog in Jake Collier, a hero to anyone like me who is also 60 pounds past his best weight and yet out there, getting it.
That's it. Well, so we'll see how many fights in a row we'll pick the same and how many upsets we're going to pick. Because right now we're going bold right out the gate.
And I've got a few more, so we will definitely see. Next up, it is the lightweights as far as Ziam takes on Luigi Vendramini. Ziam, the 24-year-old Frenchman, is 11-3 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC, having fought most recently last October at UFC Fight Night Ortega versus Korean Zombie, where he took a unanimous decision over Jamie Malarkey. He takes on Vendramini, the Italian stallion, who is from Brazil, is 9-1 overall. He also is 1-1 in the UFC. He made a short notice debut at welterweight against Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos all the way back in 2018 and lost that one, but that got his foot in the door. He came back last October and knocked out Jason Ayari with a head kick and follow-up punches at UFC on ESPN, Holm versus Aldana. Odds on this one are pretty close, but they do slightly favor the Frenchman. Ziam is minus 135. Vendramini out there around plus 110 or plus 115 as the very slight underdog. Keith, how do you see this one playing out, and who you got?
This is another good fight. This is one of the fights when you were saying, off the top of the show, like what main card fight, you're most interested in. This didn't automatically jump to my brain, but now that I think about it, like this is one I'm very intrigued from an X's and O's sense. We'll start with Ziam. Am I say that correct? I know I suck with pronunciation.
I think that's it. I'm not that confident on this one either.
The guy's only 24 years old. Like, you gotta love that. European K1 champion, take that what it will, but obviously he comes from a high level kickboxing background. He's huge for the weight class, long and lengthy. Works behind a high guard defense that's from that kickboxing. He kind of tries to hide behind his hands a lot, but he's got good footwork, good movement. He knows how to keep his length. I love his jab that he kind of uses it 2 ways. He can either, if you get in like the mid range, he uses it as a power jab. Like, he actually hurts you with it. But if you stay on the outside, he'll use it to kind of just play off and keeping his distance and kind of checking his range. Not necessarily like keeping the range, more just checking. Like, okay, I'm still up where I want to be. The one thing, and this happens to so many guys who come from kickboxing sense, they stand up very tall because, 1, they're not worried about takedowns. 2, they're used to hiding behind the big gloves where they kind of lack head movement. It was even pointed out in his last fight, like for a guy who's so decorated that he doesn't really use head movement, which is so impressive for someone like Adesanya, who also comes from that kickboxing background, who's so good at head movement. Now, obviously, that shows you how excited I am to talk about Adesanya. Back to this fight. In his last fight, so I actually thought he lost. I think I scored it for Jamie Malarkey, or it was one of those ones like I would have been okay with Jamie Malarkey when I can't remember what I sent to MMA Decisions, but I remember rewatching it. I was like, wow, this fight was closer than I remember. But he didn't like the pressure, and he really didn't like the output of Jamie Malarkey. That's what kept Jamie Malarkey in the fight. But I love that he was athletic. He throws some flying knees in, great leg kicks. He really gets power in his leg kicks. He turns over his hips. Solid clinch striker because he's so tall. He can kind of just throw those knees up so easily up the middle. I like in the fight that he went for a takedown. It's good to see a guy that comes from a kickboxing background comfortable enough to want to initiate some grappling. But the takedown wasn't the prettiest thing. But decent hip control, though. When he was taken down, he kept his hip moving, kind of created scrambles. And at one point, he actually swept Jamie Malarkey. Now, move over to Vendramini. I hope I'm saying that one name too. And I was just talking about one guy being 24. This guy's 25. He's got a 100% finish rate. He showed in his last fight great power. He's showing improving hand speed. He is wild. He is a little wild man. He wants to just kind of throw everything hard. But his leg kicks are also really, really hard. He can reach a little bit, though. Like, he'll overextend his punches, but he also reaches for punches. So when you throw a punch at him, he kind of, instead of keeping here to block or to parry, he kind of comes out here. And that's a huge no-go against him, because all you got to do is you got to throw a little feint so they reach, and then you go, and they go over the top, or over the top, and he's got to get hit. I don't know why I gave you those visuals, probably because this is the first time we're on video.
Yeah.
But he's a good grappler. Not the best entries. He's definitely not an NCAA wrestler, but he's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with 4 submissions. So he showed power in his hands. He's shown submissions on the ground. Really, really tough fight to call. Both guys are so young. I like that. I like what I've seen out of both guys. But when I'm on the fence, I always go back to the thing I've been going back to for 20 years now. If I got a striker versus a grappler, and I feel like it's a really close matchup, I'm going to go with the grappler. So I'm going to go back-to-back fights. I'm going to go with my second upset pick, and I'm going to take Luigi Vendramini I'm going to say by decision.
It's 2 for 2 right out the gate. I'm excited about the same things about Ziam that you are. I'm concerned about the same things that you are. Whether it's because of him coming from a kickboxing background, of him having the very upright stance that comes from being from that background, from being just 24 and being a tall, long, lanky guy who at 24 probably hasn't even hit his own physical peak of like muscle strength yet. He has trouble with pressure. He lost to Don Madge because Madge just kind of smothered him. He just crowded him, clinched him, just didn't let him uncork any of the cool kickboxing stuff he wanted to. And then I don't remember whether I scored the Malarkey fight for Ziam or Malarkey, but I remember it being like, man, Jamie Malarkey does not usually have this easy a time taking people down. That's concerning because, as you pointed out, Vendramini is a very good grappler who doesn't have a lot of classic entries. But Ziam is a guy that, unless he's made some strides, Vendramini is probably going to be able to get him down. I'd feel better about this if Vendramini didn't have all finishes, because I don't know what he looks like in the third round of a fight. But I'm going to pick him to finish this fight. I think Ziam probably has a higher ceiling. In fact, I'm very sure that Ziam has a higher ceiling. I think 2 years from now, Ziam is probably the better fighter of the two. But, timing is everything. And even though Vendramini is only a year older than Ziam and actually has fewer fights, he's closer to, I think, the finished product of what he's going to be. And he is a stocky and powerful little dude. I think he's going to have Ziam on his heels just with pure aggression early on while Ziam tries to stay at his preferred range. Vendramini's probably going to get him down at some point in the first round, and give me Luigi Vendramini by first round submission.
Yeah, just for the record, while you were talking, I looked up MMA decisions, and it was 15 scorecards for Malarkey, only 2 scorecards for Ziam. You did not enter your scorecard, but I'm going to assume that you were on the right side of that. So we'll say you gave it for Malarkey. I did give it to Malarkey, 29-28.
Right. The only real memory that comes up from, before I watched the fight again was man, Malarkey's getting this guy down on the ground pretty easily. But that doesn't surprise me.
I remember when we were breaking down Jamie Malarkey, and one thing I said, and I think you actually might agree with me, Malarkey was one of these guys that he's much better than I remembered.
Yeah, I underestimated a bunch of those kind of Australian guys that all came into the UFC together 3 or 4 years ago. I've had to apologize to several of them, indirectly, like Jacob Malkoon. I'm still sorry.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah, we'll get to Brad Riddell further up the card, who I've underestimated even as he's kept on winning fights. So yeah, we'll get to that soon. Next up, we head to the featherweight division as Chase Hooper takes on Steven Peterson. Hooper, the teenage dream who is now the early 20s dream. 21-year-old from Washington is 10-1-1 overall. He is 2-1 in the UFC. He fought most recently last December at UFC 256, Figueiredo versus Moreno, taking a third-round submission over Peter Barrett. That allowed him to bounce back from the first loss of his career, which was a unanimous decision against Alex Caceres last summer at UFC 250. He'll be taking on Peterson. The 31-year-old Texan is 18-9 overall. He's 2-3 in the UFC. He fought most recently last September, knocking out Martin Bravo in the second round with a spinning back fist. That was a bounce back from a 2-fight losing streak for him against Luis Pena and Alex Caceres. This one is very close to a pick'em. Peterson is minus 115. Hooper, not quite available at even money, but you can get him at minus 105 right now. Man, I don't know what Chase Hooper's ceiling is. I don't know if 10 years from now, Chase Hooper will be the 4-time defending UFC featherweight or lightweight champion, or I don't know if he will have washed out of the sport entirely. I do know, or I do at least strongly believe, that getting to the UFC as early as he did has not been a good thing for him. I think he would have been much better served to stay out in the regionals and just get in the reps and beat just some overmatched people, fighting like 4 times a year for a couple more years. I think that would have been the best thing for him. Or even if he had to take some lumps and take a loss or two out of the brightest lights, that would have been fine too. Instead, he's been a great story. He has kind of this quirky charisma, obviously. He has gone like just to the hilt on the running joke of being Ben Askren's like illegitimate kid, which I'm all for it. But yeah, I don't think it's been the best thing for him. And I mean, what's his UFC career? I mean, he blitzed Daniel Tamer. Daniel Tamer is, a borderline UFC level fighter. Again, a type of fighter that he could have faced on the regional scene, like someone of equal quality. He, like Alex Caceres, wily, tough veteran, was just way too much too soon for him. And he was losing to Peter Barrett before he heel hooked him. And I mean, we are going to get to Paul Craig further up this card, but for most human beings, like pulling out a submission after getting your ass kicked for 2.5 rounds is not it's not a recipe for longevity in the UFC. So just his in-cage product has not matched up to the kind of star the UFC wants him to be. And on the flip side of this, Steven Peterson, every time I think about Steven Peterson, I'm always surprised that he's not older than he is, because I always want to think he's like 38 or something, and he's like barely, I think he was 30 at his last fight. And I have to keep reminding myself he's from Texas. Just everything about him, from the record to the fight style to the like flaming Superman logo on his chest, just makes me think, oh yeah, this dude's from Iowa. But no, he's from Texas, and he fights out of Fortis. I've got Peterson in this one. I think the odds are about where they should be. He shouldn't be a massive favorite over Hooper. Hooper has definite routes to victory, namely a submission. But Peterson's gonna. I mean, he hits harder. He's a better striker. He's a serviceable wrestler, and he's not a complete chump on the ground. I don't see where Hooper wins this outside of pulling out something like he did against Barrett. And I mean, Barrett's another fun story to have made it into the UFC, but Peterson is a better version of that same story. Give me Steven Peterson by decision.
Well, the first thing we got to do for Steven Peterson, if he doesn't remind you of Texas, is he needs to be sponsored by Buc-ee's.
Yeah.
They come out with the big beaver shirt, and,
yep.
And let's come on, man. Let's get. Right, we need to somehow merge the UFC with that great company.
I'm gonna look up your birthday in the Sherdog Fight Finder, and I'm gonna send you a care package of Buc-ee's stuff for your next birthday.
I got the big birthday coming up this next birthday.
Definitely send you.
I love Buc-ee's. You know what? You want to make the announcement now? Let's just do the announcement now.
Which announcement?
the newest sponsor of the Sherdog Radio Network is Buc-ee's.
Oh well,
We haven't told them yet, but I'm sure somebody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who's high up in Buc-ee's and can get us a Buc-ee's sponsorship. Let's make that happen.
And seriously, you don't even need to give us cash. We would do it just for like your jerky and your barbecue.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
And like we get one of those pictures and we'll like hang it in our background, like one of those beautiful pictures they have in their bathrooms. They're for sale. Yeah. It's awesome. That's like going to the bathroom and looking up and seeing a picture for sale next to you. It's fantastic. Anyways, speaking of bathrooms, that made me think of this fight. Steve, so I am actually intrigued by this, and it's 100% Chase Hooper, like where is he at his career. I'll start with Steven Peterson. Steven Peterson's a terrible athlete. Like, let's just be honest. Like, if we've done this before, if we were lining up all the guys running a race in the division, Steven Peterson, he's gonna be at the end. But if it's a long distance one, he's probably still running. Like he's probably like Chase Hooper's gonna beat him in a race, but Steven Peterson probably beats him in a marathon. But he's not a very technically sound guy. He's kind of slow. He does has high volume. Like, he throws a lot of punches. He works behind a busy jab, but he lacks power. Most of his punches are mostly arm punches. Now, I know people say, what do you mean he lacks power? His last fight was a knockout. Yeah, it was a Hail Mary spinning back fist knockout in a fight that he was losing up to that point, and losing convincingly. He constantly fighting off his back foot. He has your high guard defense, but it doesn't really help him because he's a pretty stationary target, doesn't move his head much. He's a weak defensive wrestler. You said he was a serviceable offensive wrestler, and I agree with that from the Matt Bessette fight. Like, he won because he got takedowns on Matt Bessette. And his BJJ isn't too bad. Like, we think about Steven Peterson as this like slugging, brawler, and he really should be a grappler. He's better. He's probably better at on the ground than he is on the feet. And then when he has been taken down, he has done pretty well to get back to his feet, and he's got good cardio, regardless of having all these physical limitations. He puts himself in fights by just fighting, constantly for 15 minutes. As far as Hooper, so let's just talk about his style. He's southpaw. His striking is pretty ugly. As we talked last time, we said he has some natural tools that you're born with. Like, he has a long reach. He has some insane toughness. He marches down his foe. He throws. He's a guy that you could tell he's like done a lot of rounds on a bag, where he throws straight punches, or he's done those classes where, like, all right, we'll do this combination. It's like 1-2 right hook, and he attacks with that combination without really letting it flow. He's not a good athlete, though. He's kind of slow. He lacks power. I mean, that is, some of that has to do with his age. I expect his power to come along as he gets better. Doesn't have, as we just talked about, his combinations, doesn't have much variety in his strikes. Kind of the same. And the Alex Caceres fight, he's do the same 1-2 combination over and over again. We talked about the last time when we were breaking down his fight against Peter Barrett. But he is insanely tough. He kept going after Alex Caceres, even though he was getting destroyed. But he telegraphs his shots. But I mind you, again, he's only 21. He looks to get to the fight to the ground any way possible. He's a weak wrestler, though. For someone who has, like, known for jiu-jitsu, he struggles to get to the ground. But he's relentless. Like, he's going to get you there. He's going to try to get you there any way possible. Like, he'll pull guard, he'll Imanari roll, he'll just straight bull rush you and try to catch you against the cage. And he's very aggressive once he gets to the ground. Like, he's aggressive for submission. He uses his long arms and legs to lock on a submission. He can make a comeback win because of his submissions. He'll attack knees and ankles. We saw that against Peter Barrett. Got some slick back takes. Even though he was getting outclassed by Caceres, he had his back a few times. He gets some submissions off his back. And if he's on top, he's some decent ground and pound. So right now, Steven Peterson is the favorite. I was surprised by that. I would have thought Hooper would be the favorite. I feel very similar how you feel about Hooper. Like, at best, he's an extremely low UFC level talent right now. And that's where Peterson is too. 2 years from now, I would be taking Hooper all day and feeling confident. However, I'm going to do the same route I did with Jordan Levitt. Until I see a better stand-up, I'm going to keep picking against him. Like, he probably wins this fight. Like, Peterson's probably a guy he can beat. But I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to, until you show me that you have at least competent stand-up, striking, give me Peterson in a really, really close, nitty-gritty matchup. And I'll say Peterson by split decision.
There you go. 2 picks for the veteran. The UFC 263 prelims power on in the lightweight division, as it is Matt the Steamroller Frevola against Terrance T-Rex McKinney. Frevola, the 30-year-old New Yorker, is 8-2-1 overall. He is 2-2-1 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought most recently back in January at UFC 257, losing a lopsided unanimous decision to late-notice replacement opponent Arman Tsarukyan. That snapped a 2-fight winning streak for the New Yorker. He will be welcoming to the UFC extremely short notice, extremely short turnaround opponent, McKinney. McKinney fought at LFA 109 in the headline fight 4 days ago, as of the time we're recording this. He'll be fighting on exactly a week's notice. He steps up just within the last 24 hours, as Frevola's originally scheduled opponent, Frank Camacho, was in a car wreck apparently and got injured. So certainly best wishes to him for a speedy recovery, but perhaps an indication that this fight is not meant to happen, as this one had already been pushed back at least once for COVID considerations. So let this not become our, Khabib versus Tony of the next 5 years. McKinney is 26 years old, hails from Washington State. He's 10-3 overall. As I said, he's making his UFC debut. He actually appeared on Dana White's Contender Series back in season 3. He was the springboard for Sean Woodson to enter the UFC. He lost by second round flying knee knockout. Put his hard hat back on, went to work. He went on a 3-fight winning streak, and now he gets his ultra short notice debut. He is a substantial underdog, perhaps partly because of that. Frevola is minus 275. McKinney out there around plus 235 or so as the underdog. Keith, as both of these guys are Contender Series people, I will certainly throw it to you first. How do you see this one playing out? And win or lose, this is pretty much a house money fight for Terrance McKinney. Do you think he sticks in the UFC long term?
Yeah, absolutely. Like McKinney's a guy that I thought he was one of the guys on the Contender Series I was really high on. He just ran into Sean Woodson in a fight that, he got flying knee knocked out. He was winning that fight up in that point. He was taking him down. He's got some good wins since the Contender Series. He's a guy, he fights in LFA. It's always like the fast route to the UFC. Yeah, I'm glad he's in the UFC, and I think it's a really, really fantastic matchup. Poor Matt Frevola is twice now. His last 2 fights have been canceled the week of the fight, and he gets a new opponent.
And last time it was a brutal, getting Arman Tsarukyan on like 2 days' notice. That sucks.
But props to him for not, knowing that it's both times it changed styles, became a wrestler where he comes from a wrestling background. Now he's going against McKinney, another guy with wrestling. Like it became a harder matchup, and he still was willing to take the fight. So shout out to Matt Frevola. Frevola's on the feet. He's really fun. Like, he's just a fun guy. He's very aggressive. He's wild, throwing nonstop power shots. Tries ending the fight with one punch. Loads up on everything. It wants to brawl, but that makes him very hittable. He's got tons of heart. Like he'll keep coming, but he's been hurt in. It seems like every single fight he's been hurt. But he's also a good wrestler. He's well rounded. He's good entries. Sometimes he can shoot from far too away. But one thing about him, he's not a power through you guy. He just wants to start a scramble. And what I like about him, and I said this last time we were breaking down, I like that he lands punches in the scrambles. He doesn't always just want to win the position. He understands the fighting aspect of it. Like while I'm taking you back, if I, instead of grabbing your arm to flatten you out, I punch you in the face. Like that's going to help me. Good cardio, just as I mentioned, just keeps coming. He has 3 submission wins on the ground. He loves his guillotine, which can come in very handily against a wrestler if you can catch it. Moving McKinney, like I said, I'm glad he's in the UFC. I think he's well-rounded, southpaw, very fast hands. He loves his push kicks. He's got big power. He's got a 100% stoppage rate. He also is wild on the feet. Like he throws hard, throws everything in his shots. On the ground, junior college wrestling champion. lightning fast entries. Like he's on your hips fast, turning the corner before you even sprawl. If he's on top, he's looking to advance position, or he grounds and pound you, as we just saw 5 days ago. His ground and pound can put you out. That's what he did in his last opponent 5 days ago. And he is a submission. He's got 6 wins by submission. His gas tank is a big question mark because he's never been to a decision. I'm not concerned so much about taking a short notice fight as he'll gas out, because he's taking it on 5 days notice or 6, whatever, whatever it was. It's more of having to cut weight twice. Now, his last fight was a catch weight of 160, but, make it 160 and then make it 155. As far as this fight, you said last time that it became a much harder fight for Matt Frevola taking on Arman Tsarukyan. I actually think this is a harder fight going from Frank Camacho to Terrance McKinney, just from a style sense. I think McKinney might be the better wrestler. I don't know, which would be fun to find out. He might have the better stand-up. I think he hits harder of the two. And I've seen McKinney rock a lot of people in the feet, and I've seen Frevola rocked a lot of times best. This is a real, like what's the word I'm looking for? Catch fight. Like, this is a real trap fight. Like there's if he's looking past McKinney, he's gonna get put out. And you know what? I'm going upset again, and I'm going a pretty big upset. I think this is 4 fights. I'm taking 3 upsets out of the 4 fights. Give me McKinney. I think McKinney puts him out. I'll say second round knockout.
There you go. We've both picked a few upsets. This is an upset. This is 2.5 to 1 odds. My hat is off to you, sir. It's a dangerous fight for Frevola for all the reasons you mentioned. Like, McKinney he's lightning, and he's a finisher. I mean, I've seen, I think, 5 or 6 of his fights. Not only have I only seen him go past the first round once, I've only seen him go past 3 minutes once, and that was the Woodson fight. The thing that concerns me about the Woodson fight is, yes, he was winning, but in the second round, he already looked tired, and he looked more tired than Sean Woodson. If your gas tank is on the worse than Sean Woodson side, that's concerning. And it's doubly concerning, again, if you're having to cut weight twice in a week. If McKinney had just gotten signed out of LFA like he might well have been anyway, and he and Frevola fought 3 months from now on full camps, this would be a super, super trap fight for Frevola. As it is, I think McKinney's got about 3 minutes to finish Matt Frevola. Otherwise, Frevola, he's got one of the most appropriate nicknames in the UFC. He's fun to watch on the feet. He's a surprisingly effective wrestler. But yeah, it's heart, it's stamina, and he just kind of steamrolls people. It's, how we beat people like, Jalen Turner, who's, bigger fighter, better athlete, probably has several individual skills that are much better. Yeah, I've got Frevola by decision in this one. I could see him being in trouble in the first round, maybe even taking enough damage that he loses the first round and has to win the second and third to win the fight. But again, if this fight makes it to the 3-minute mark and Frevola is still standing, I think it's his fight to lose. So give me Matt Frevola by decision. And finally, we disagree on a fight. It is now time for the bantamweights and the first women's fight on the UFC 263 lineup. It is Pannie Kianzad versus Alexis Davis. Kianzad, the 29-year-old Swede, is 14-5 overall. She is 3-2 in the UFC. She is 3-1 in this stint with the UFC since returning after losing at the Tough 28 finale. She is on a 3-fight winning streak. She's defeated Jessica Rose Clark, Betch Correia, and most recently, last December, Sijara Eubanks. All 3 of those fights by unanimous decision. That is a bounce back from her loss to Julia Avila in her return fight to the UFC. She'll be taking on the everything old is new again. Davis, the 36-year-old Canadian veteran, is 20-10 overall. She is 7-5 in the UFC. She won her last appearance, defeating Sabina Mazo by unanimous decision at UFC Fight Night Rosenstrike versus Gane. That was her first fight in nearly 2 years, and it was the end of a 3-fight losing streak. She had exited the UFC, well, not exited entirely, but she had a long layoff after consecutive losses to Caitlin Chikagi, Jennifer Maia, and Viviane Araujo. Odds favor Kianzad here. She is out there at minus 190 or so. You can get Davis at plus 160, plus 165 as the underdog. One thing that's nice about Alexis Davis being back in the UFC is that Roxanne Modafferi now has a competitor for who would come in last if you did a decathlon among all female fighters. She's 36 now. Even when she was 26, she was never a plus athlete. I mean, she is hard-nosed grinder. I think of probably her best individual skill as her offensive wrestling. She's always been pretty effective at getting the takedown, despite her lack of an explosive first step or really slick traditional entries. She just kind of like Modafferi, just finds a way to get the fight to the ground and has learned to take care of herself, reasonably well on the feet in recent years. I mean, she had that 3-fight losing streak, but it was against 3 really good fighters in Chikagian, Maia, and Araujo. I mean, 2 of them are title challenger level fighters, and the other's a contender. And several of those fights were close. Like, I probably underestimated her when she came back. And she is just exactly the kind of fighter that has always been poisoned for Pannie Kianzad. Like, I don't know this for a fact. Pannie Kianzad trains in Denmark, lives in Sweden. I've never been in a room training with her, let alone trained with her myself. But I have the feeling that she is someone who absolutely kills in the gym, and just a lot of it doesn't make it to the cage. It's so easy to take her out of her game plan. She responds poorly to pressure. She responds poorly to people trying to bully her physically. Like, on paper, she's a good striker. She's a very slick grappler. Like, I think one of the better pure submission grapplers in kind of that 125, 135 range of the women's divisions. But I just don't have any faith that it's going to show in a fight with someone like Davis. If it's a fighter that like Davis, that I'm always having to remind myself that she's better than her record is and she's better than I remember her being, and then someone like Pannie Kianzad, where I have to remind myself that I'm kind of disappointed halfway through every one of her fights because she's capable of more and it just doesn't happen. I know how I'm going. Just it's a bit of an upset, but give me Alexis Davis by decision, and I feel pretty good about this one. I'll mark this down as my upset special.
All right. Wow. Yeah, I'm intrigued in X and O's sense, which is, I don't know how many fights we're in now, but we're probably 5 fights, 6 fights in, and 5 fights in, and I'm still intrigued. I haven't had that bathroom break fight yet. I'm not taking it on this one. Kianzad, she looks better each fight every time I've seen her fighting, and she had a 3-fight winning streak. I actually like the girl she beat. Like, it's 3 quality wins: Jessica Rose-Clark, Betchka Hea, and Sajara Eubanks. She's 29, but she definitely has a veteran feel to her. She's a big bantamweight. I mean, she's a former featherweight. She, on the feet, high output. I was looking, and I don't do numbers. We don't do it on the recap show. We don't do this many significant strikes. Like, that's not our style. But in her last 3 fights, this is, as saying that, I'm going to bring up these numbers. Her last 3 fights, her significant strikes in those 3 fights were 98, 108, and 92. Those are some good numbers. And the reason why we don't bring up, side note, the reason why I shouldn't speak for both of us. The reason why I don't really like to bring up significant strike numbers in this, because not all significant strikes are equal. Nope. Anyways, back to it. She's a good boxer. I think her boxing is good. I think she's constantly moving forward. I think she's pretty fast. I think she has decent power. I like that she stays very compact. Like, it's everything's tight. Busy jab. Adds in low kicks into her combinations, which I like. She has some defensive holes. She's very hittable. She keeps her head on the center line. But in the grappling sense, she's very physically strong in the clinch. Weak takedown defense, and she struggles to get back up. But her top game, I think, is pretty good. If she gets you taken down, she can hold you down. She can work for submission. Moving to Alexis Davis, as we just talked about the output of Pannie Kianzad, it's you never outwork Alexis Davis. Like that's her game. She's going to be working. She's a pressure counter striker on the feet, good at timing her opponent's attacks. She also attacks with combinations. Her best strike is probably her straight right. It's just a very basic down the pipe punch. She tends to hang her hands a little low though. She works a lot of kicks too, part of her game. But in the clinch, she's a grinder. She's just going to grind in there. She'll get in the clinch. She wants chest to chest, mixing some takedowns from the clinch. Her entries are okay. Like she's not Sarah McMahon or Tatiana Suarez. But she does, as you mentioned, she finds ways to get on top. Like a scramble's going to ensue, and usually she's the one who's going to be on top. She's more of a topside grappler than an overall grappler. Like she's not that good on her back. She can get a submission off her back, and she has 8 submission wins in her career. But like she needs to be from the top. Like she's got good top control, good ground and pound. And we talked about this last time. She gets taken down because of her overconfidence, I think, in her grappling. She does have good cardio, though. One thing that really worries me, and I probably should do this a little higher up in the striking, is she's taken a lot of punishment, and she has a lot of scar tissue, so she's always bloody. I think about like the Vivian Araujo fight, she was bloody up bad. And even in the fight that she won at Sabina Mazo, she was bloodied up. As far as predictions go, it is really hard, and it made me second guess it too. It's always hard to pick against Alexis Davis because even though she could be outmatched skilled, she's going to find a way to make this fight close. Like this is not going to be a one-sided affair for Penny Kianzad if Penny Kianzad wins. Like she's going to have to work for every moment of that fight. However, Alexis Davis' grit and toughness can only take her so far, and I think there's such a mismatch on the feet. And Davis is at the point in her career where she really should. I mean, I think we've already seen signs of decline, but it really should continue. And Kianzad's the opposite. She's in the prime years. She's never looked better. So we're going to disagree again. I'm going to take Penny Kianzad. I'm going to take her by decision.
There you go. The kind of gentlemen's disagreements and high drama that you tune in for, folks. We head back to the featherweight division for the next prelim, and it is an indication of how stacked the UFC 263 card is that kind of in the middle of the prelims, there is a matchup in one of the 2 or 3 deepest divisions in the UFC between 2 guys where the winner might well, be on the verge, might well be in the top 10 of the UFC rankings and will probably be in the lower reaches of the Sherdog rankings as well. That's just how much good stuff is on this card. It is Movsar Evloev versus Hakeem Dawodu. Evloev, the 27-year-old Russian, is a perfect 14-0 in his professional career. He is a perfect 4-0 in the UFC. Fought most recently back in January at UFC 257, where he took a split decision over Nick Lentz. He will be taking on Dawodu. The 29-year-old Canadian is 12-1-1 overall. He is 5-1 in the UFC. He dropped his UFC debut in shocking fashion, getting choked all the way out by Danny Henry back in March of 2018. Since then, he has won 5 straight over pretty solid opposition. Austin Arnett, Kyle Bochniak, Yoshinori Horie, Julio Arce, and most recently last September, took a split decision over Zubaira Tukugov. Odds in this one do strongly favor the Russian. He is out there at minus 235 or so, where you can get Dawodu at plus 190 or plus 195 as the underdog. Keith, this is a very high-level prospect / borderline contender matchup, yet one man is the substantial favorite. Do you agree, and how do you see this fight playing out?
I'm not surprised, I'll say. Like, I'm not surprised that Evloev is the favorite. I mean, he's got it. He's had some great showings in the UFC so far. Dawodu, though, he's been looking pretty good himself. Now, Dawodu is a counter striker that stays very composed on the feet. Like, that what really jumps out to me. He stalks his prey, but he doesn't over pursue. He doesn't waste energy. And that actually can be a little too much. Like, he can be a slow starter. We talked about that in the past. He's also a high guard defense guy. uses feints well, great calf kicks. Like that's when he starts turning those hips, it's a thing of beauty, especially his last fight. He doesn't check leg kicks though, which is surprising for someone who throws so many calf kicks himself. Um, I wouldn't say he's a weak defensive wrestler, but he has been taken down 3 out of his last 4 fights. But you have to work to get him down, and then if you get him down, you have to work even harder to get back up. Like he's I wouldn't say he's not an explosive athlete. Like when stereotype, they let's say stereotype black guy, oh, explosive. That's not Dawodu. He's just he's more technically sound and has very stereotype or not stereotype was the word to say, pun. He's mean. Like he turns those when he throws calf kicks, he wants to rip your calf muscle off your bone. Like that's when he throws it. Move over to Evloev. Evloev is way different. He's just smooth. I think he's so good. He's so well-rounded, so technical on the feet. High output on the feet, quick hands, real snap in his punches. Beautiful. Like his stinging jab, like he just works behind his jab. Slips punches so smoothly, but he does it while also keeping himself in range. Like the flyweight champion of the world we're talking about, Deiveson Figueiredo, a very similar style where he slips not to necessarily miss the punch, but to set up his own shots. He can sneak in kicks in his combinations. He loves spinning attacks. I kind of wish he would do it last thing. I don't think they're as effective, and I think they're a little waste of energy, but he'll throw it in, just kind of excite you. And he's a good wrestler. Like, not even good, he's a great wrestler. Perfect timing on his reactionary double. Shoots when his opponent starts to strike. He's really good at, okay, I'm going to strike now when they think I'm going to wrestle. Now I'm going to wrestle when they think I'm going to strike. But one thing that's surprising, and I said it last time, is I'm surprised how much he struggles to keep people down. Like, he takes you down, but his top game he's not Habib on top. Though he is a submission threat. I was surprised in the Barzolov. Actually, it's been 3 fights. Like, even though he's such a great offensive wrestler, he's been taken down by Enrique Barzola, Mike Grundy, and Nick Letts. Now, all 3 of them are good wrestlers, but I'm just surprised that he was taken down by all 3 of them. But when he took him down, he initiated insane scrambles, Grammy rolls, and sit outs, and all kinds of stuff. Really, really fun guy. This fight is so good, but give me Evloev. He is the better wrestler. I think he might be the better striker. And sometimes Dawodu fights down to his competition. That's why he's like so many. Like, he had split decisions. I think it was like Collier was a split decision.
He has 3 split decisions 3 decisions, 2 splitters in his 5-fight. Yeah, no, 3 split decisions in his 5-fight win streak. Tukugov, Arce, and Bokniak.
Yeah. I think he fights down to his competition. And I know Nick Lent's fight with Evloev was a split decision. That shouldn't have been a split decision. That was an easy one for Evloev. Give me Evloev. I'm going to say he makes it the distance. Dawodu makes it the distance. So give me Evloev by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm really high on both these guys as prospects, but this lines up badly for Dawodu. I was going to mention the whole split decision thing independently because Dawodu is not good at winning rounds. It is kind of the problem. Like, you mentioned he's a slow starter, and even once he's kind of gotten into his flow, he's not always a high volume guy. He's sometimes a guy who's a little too willing to wait, throw out a few calf kicks, and it can make it hard. It can make it hard for judges to see the extent to which he's controlling a fight. Like, his fights, at least at the UFC level, basically always go to decision, and they always seem closer than they need to be. When, even though he's like the superior fighter, that's tough against Evloev. Like you pointed out, he's so well-rounded. Dawodu will, if this fight is just conducted on the feet and Dawodu does his usual thing, he'll probably lose all 3 rounds. Evloev will be busier. He'll be slick. He'll stay in range, like you said. And then there's the question of the wrestling. You and I both couldn't stop talking about the Evloev versus Grundy fight last summer. Just, where Grundy, a very, very good wrestler, could get him down but couldn't keep him down. Just the scrambles were insane. It was such a fun fight. I don't know if this fight goes to the ground much, like, unless Evloev wants it there. I can't picture Dawodu trying to bring the fight to the ground. But yeah, like I like Dawodu a lot. There are a lot of, I mean, there are ranked featherweights that he could definitely give a run for their money, but Evloev is one, I think he's probably the future of the division, and two, just in the specifics, they don't match up well for Dawodu. Give me Evloev by decision, by decision as well. Next up on the UFC 263 prelims, it is the flyweights as Lauren Murphy and Joanne Calderwood go at it. Once again, an indication of what a strong card this is, that a likely title eliminator is not even the top prelim. Murphy, the 37-year-old Alaskan fighting out of Houston, is 14-4 overall. She is 6-4 in the UFC. She fought most recently last October, choking out Lilia Shakirova in the second round of their matchup at UFC 254. Previous to that, she took a unanimous decision over Roxanne Modafferi at UFC on ESPN Blades versus Volkov. She is on a 4-fight winning streak. She takes on Calderwood. The 34-year-old Scot by way of Las Vegas is 15-5 overall. She is 7-5 in the UFC. Fought most recently in January at UFC 257, taking a unanimous decision over Jessica I. Calderwood, of course, very famously, a little over a year ago, had been slated for a title shot against Valentina Shevchenko, chose to take a fight in between while Shevchenko recuperated and lost to Jennifer Maia. So here we have a possible title eliminator between one woman who I don't think anyone would have argued against her getting a title shot without having to take this fight, and another who would already have had a title shot, had she not made that fateful decision. This is about as high level of fight as you can put together in the UFC flyweight division without Valentina Shevchenko in it. Odds are close on this one. Calderwood actually the favorite. She's minus 150. You can get Murphy at plus 130 as the underdog. Who do you like in this one, Keith?
I like the fight. That's the first thing I like. I'm really, really intrigued. It's a good stylistic matchup. I'm gonna start with Murphy. I'm gonna say this, and I don't know if this is controversial, but I think it's unpopular. I think Lana Murphy should be fighting for the UFC title over Juliana Pena. Like, she's been on a better run than Juliana Pena. There you go.
Yep.
I mean, Juliana Pena talked herself into the title shot. Laura Murphy, she's not a great athlete, but she just makes up for it with output and power. She's a good boxer, busy jab, generates power because she really sits on her punches. She throws a lot of power shots. She hurt her last two opponents on the feet with power shots. She's really good at moving and then pulling her opponents into her power shots, which is what people mean is you're throwing the punches while they're coming forward. As you're backing up, suddenly you stop, you hold your ground while they're coming forward, and you pull them into your power shot. So it becomes twice as more powerful because one, you're throwing obviously your power shot, but they're also moving into it, which is a very common technique in boxing. That's one thing she likes to do well. The other thing about her is she can take a beating and she just keeps moving. She does struggle with checking kicks. That's one thing because she's such a heavy, sitting on her punches, so heavy on her front foot. But she's strong in the clinch just because she's a strong woman. She can get you in the clinch, grind on you. But she's got okay entries from that time outside. She'll surprise you and try to win round with a takedown. She's intelligent, decent top control. I would say okay takedown defense. She's definitely not a wrestler, or she's not Evloev scrambling, but she's not easy to take down. Then move over to Calderwood. Calderwood's a Muay Thai style striker. She stands up tall. She likes the kicks and the clinch. Good volume. I would say she lacks punching power. She's not a big, puncher, but she's got a solid jab, but lots of kicks, leg kicks, teep kicks. She likes stepping knees. If you're getting close, she'll look for a slicing elbow. She does keep her chin high, and she kind of pulls her head back to avoid shots. She also pulls her head when she's throwing punches. And what I mean by that, like when you pull, you kind of you're trying to punch with your hand or your arm. You're trying to punch with your fist, but also pulling your body away so you don't get countered, and you lose all your power when you do that. It's very amateur. I can't. It's late at night. It's a very amateur move. She she will get the fight to the ground, but it's usually like her catching a kick or something. They get bull rushing over. She stands up very high though, keeps her chin very open target because of that. She's a weak defensive wrestler. She was taken down 3 times by Andrew Lee, who, as we said last time we worked it out, not a good wrestler. She's been subbed in several fights. Rose Namajunas subbed her. Marina Moroz subbed her. Jessica Andrade subbed her. Jennifer Maia subbed her. She's just very inconsistent. Like if she gets you in the clinch, she can do some real good damage in the clinch. But then she she'll look great against Jessica I, but then she loses Jennifer Maia, and it's like, well, which girl is she? And I know it's two different. One was a very stand-up oriented fight, one was on the ground. So I don't think she's one-dimensional, but she has been dominated on the ground very easily. So as far as prediction goes, this is an extremely hot fight. This is one of the ones to me is a coin toss. This is as close as it comes. I said I liked the Collier heavyweight title run. I feel the same way about Lauren Murphy title run. She can't be in the kicking range with Calderwood. She can't be all the way in the clinch range. She can be. Sorry, she doesn't want to be where while they're exchanging punches with his distance. She doesn't want to be able to where Calderwood can grab her neck in the kind of plum clincher. She can be in a chest-to-chest grind against the fence clinch grain. I just want to point that out there. However, I think she can out-wrestle Calderwood, but more importantly, I think if she can get to the pocket, I think she can land some good shots and outbox her. Give me Murphy by split decision. I say Lauren Murphy finally gets herself a title shot.
I'm with you on this one, and I would have been even more confident about it before I saw Calderwood versus I, because Calderwood beat I badly. She won all 3 rounds. Definitely pieced her up on the feet both at range and in close. And I tried to get it to the ground multiple times and had very little success. That worries me because those are all things that do factor into Lauren Murphy's route to victory against her. I love that you kind of split up your discussion of the clinch, because there's Calderwood has very good knees from the clinch, and for somebody who has always been a little susceptible to getting physically bullied both at strawweight and at flyweight, she is strong in the clinch. When she gets the double collar tie, when she gets the plum, she does I'm not saying she's Anderson Silva, but she seems to have her way with physically stronger fighters. She just has good technique there. But a lot of Murphy's wins in this streak, she's done a lot of that just chest pressure against the fence. That's kind of been her safe spot. So I think this fight's going to be won or lost in the clinch. Murphy, she might strike for some takedowns. She's probably going to take some damage on the feet if she hangs out in kicking range for any significant amount of time. But this fight's going to be won or lost in the clinch. And like I said, I would have been really confident in Murphy in this one if I hadn't seen Calderwood against I. I thought it was one of the better performances of her UFC run. Just a fighter who at one point would have been a bad stylistic match for her, and Calderwood just outclassed her. I'm going with Murphy as well, but I'm not super confident in it. Like you said, Calderwood has been very inconsistent. She's beaten better fighters than Murphy. She's lost to much lesser fighters than Murphy. And that being the case, I'm gonna go with Murphy, but it is not a real strong pick.
Let me correct something before I get murdered. I mixed up my weight classes for a second. I said that I thought that Lauren Murphy deserved a title shot over Juliana Pena. No, I'm mixing up. I remember I was upset about Juliana Pena getting a title shot. It was Yana Kunitskaya who deserves a shot more than Juliana Pena. But there's a trend to my madness. I thought Lauren Murphy should have already got a title shot against Valentina Shevchenko instead of Jennifer Maia. So sorry, I mixed up my weight class. But either way, my point was, Lauren Murphy should have got a title shot. Juliana Pena should not have. Jennifer Maia had 1 win. Lauren Murphy's on a 3-fight winning streak. That's where I was going.
There you go.
Sorry.
Next up at the UFC 263 prelims, it is the first of three rematches on the card. This one, a light heavyweight matchup between two habitual middleweights in Eryk Anders and Darren Stewart. Anders, the 34-year-old Alabaman, is 13-5 with one no contest. He's 5-5 with one no contest in the UFC. Stewart, the 30-year-old Brit, is 12-6 with two no contests. He is 5-6 with two no contests in the UFC. The most recent no contest for both men, of course, took place back in March, where a wild first round ended in disappointment for all involved when Anders landed an inadvertent but blatantly illegal knee on Stewart while he was grounded. Fight was called, no contest. They remade it here a couple months later. By mutual agreement, the two of them will be contesting this one at light heavyweight. Anders is the slight favorite to get it done this way this time through legal means, as he is out there at minus 150. Stewart is available plus 125, plus 130 as the underdog. Keith, who do you like in this one?
I like the matchup. As you mentioned, it's at light heavyweight. I like that. I talked to Eryk Anders, and he said, yeah, we both said we fought each other a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago. Let's not cut weight again. Let's move up to light heavyweight. And I'm like, that's cool. Especially, the winner doesn't get that much gain in the division in middleweight, so why cut the weight? I'll start with Anders. I thought Anders looked great in his last fight. Like southpaw, he was more aggressive than usual. The commentators talked about how big he looked in there, like physically big. And this is a guy that was always a physically big middleweight. Good power. I mean, obviously he had hurt. Stewart hurt bad. He was marching forward. He looked faster than usual. He does, usually rely too much on his left hand. He throws it over and over again. And he tries to end it with one punch every time. He often doesn't look to grapple, but in this fight he did a little bit. Like he went in for, he picked Stewart up at one point. Cardio has been an issue in the past. We saw him slow down against Gerald Meerschaert. But he looked much better against Yatko in that fight. So he's taken a lot of damage. I think about the fight against Thiago Santos, the fight against Clear Roundtree as examples. And he was even hurt about Gerald Meerschaert. So I want to pump the brakes a little bit on my Eryk Anders love because I might get oversold by 5 minutes of what I saw. So I don't want people to think I'm like driving his bandwagon. Now move over to Darren Stewart. He's not that fast, but he's got good power. He loves to brawl, though he might not want to against Eryk Anders after what happened in the first fight. I mean, yeah, there was an illegal knee, but he was on his way out anyways. Mm-hmm. Good calf kicks, though. And Darren Stewart, we talked about Anders not wrestling enough. Darren Stewart is an underrated grappler. Like, he's pretty good. He's usually very physically strong. He's usually the stronger fighter. That won't be the case against Eryk Anders. And I think it might be a bigger disadvantage when they move up to light heavyweight. You had another 20 pounds to Eryk Anders. That might be a bad thing, but maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it was a strategy thing. Apparently Stewart's camp is one who suggested it. So maybe they think, well, Anders adding 20 pounds will make it a little slower. Like, I don't know. But in the clinch is an area that Stewart does really well. He can sneak in a takedown. He can catch a submission. He loves the guillotine. He's got some pretty good ground and pound. So as far as prediction goes, last time I picked Stewart, I feel very uncomfortable saying this. Anders showed me enough in that 5 minute, 4.5 minutes or whatever it was to change my mind. I think the fight could have been stopped even before the illegal knee. I say Anders doesn't miss the opportunity this time. I'm going to say Anders gets a second round TKO.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the odds are as close as they are considering the outcome of the first fight because, yeah, it was on the verge of being stopped anyway. Like, it would have been a slightly early stoppage if it had been stopped 3 seconds before, but not like, screaming at the TV early. Like, I thought he was going to finish that fight before the end of the round. And I'm with you. Like, Anders looked really good against Stewart. Even though he lost to Krzysztof Yatko, I thought he looked pretty good in the loss because The problem with Eryk Anders early on was he was just so prone to getting outclassed by more sophisticated strikers of almost any kind. I mean, Lyoto Machida was way too much too early for such a raw prospect. But, I mean, Elias Theodoro, he lost a terrible, slow-paced kickboxing match to Theodoro. And the problem there is, that's Theodoro's fight. Like, he wants to win a terrible, slow-paced, like, kickboxing match where he throws, like, 6 kicks around and just stays away from his opponent. But for Anders to let him do that was incredibly disappointing. And then, I mean, his fight against Roundtree that you mentioned, that's another one that's about as wrong as I've ever been about a fight. Like, I thought of them as I thought of them as pretty similar fighters in a pretty similar place competitively. And Roundtree had just, been talking about doing his last couple camps in Thailand. I wasn't a big believer in the fighter vacation, like Thailand thing. And Khalil Roundtree came back looking, like a Lumpini champ. Maybe Anders has moved past that. Maybe just, kind of a late starter in MMA and things are just starting to click for him now. I'm like you that I'm not ready to pronounce him a completely different fighter based on 4.5 minutes of work, but I am prepared to pronounce him better than Darren Stewart based on that 4.5 minutes of work because it was against Stewart. I'm with you. I've got Anders in this one. The line does not make a whole lot of sense to me. Give me Anders by first round knockout. That brings us to the featured prelim of UFC 263. It is a lightweight scrap between Drew Dober and Brad Riddell. Dober, the 32-year-old Nebraska native, is 23-10 with 1 no contest overall. He's 9-6 with 1 no contest in the UFC. Fought most recently back in March at UFC 259, getting choked out in the 3rd round by Islam Makhachev. That snapped a 3-fight winning streak over Marco Polo Reyes, Nasrat Haqparast, and Alexander Hernandez. He will take on Riddell, the 29-year-old New Zealander, is 9-1 overall. He's a perfect 3-0 in the UFC, having defeated Jamie Malarkey, Magomed Mustafayev, and most recently, last September, Alex da Silva Coelho. Odds in this one slightly favor Dober. He is minus 140. You can get Riddell at plus 120 on the comeback. Keith, obviously you love this fight. If you don't love this fight, you probably don't like MMA very much, but who do you like in this fight?
Oh man, I have no idea. This is another one of these coin tosses. It's such a fun stylistic match, especially on the feet. Drew Dober, he's just one of these guys who's made so much improvements over the years. I mean, this is a guy that was at one point I looked at as a low-level UFC talent. Now I look at him as one of the best strikers in the division. Southpaw, really good kickboxing. He's more of a counter striker that uses pressure. He likes to move forward, get you to punch, then he lands shots. Love his head movement. I love his feints. I like his slip and rip style. He hits hard. And the reason we talked about this last time, the reason why he hits so hard is his foot placement. He constantly sets up his straight right by stepping just out of the center line, lining up his punch right on target. He can chase the KO sometimes, kind of throwing so hard instead of just flowing, which he doesn't need to do. Like he's so technically sound, and he's built look at him. He's built like a freaking fire hydrant. So he can just kind of throw, and he's gonna knock you out. Also, when he overthrows, it sets him up for his biggest weakness, which is wrestling. It sets him up to be taken down. We saw that in his last fight. He was taken down tons of times. However, I don't think that's going to be the case this time, as he took on probably the best wrestler in the division. I said this last time, and I'll say it again. We won't ever see an elite Drew Dober, an elite lightweight, until he fixes his defensive wrestling. Brad Riddell, I'm going to use the same exact notes I had for Gregor Gillespie because he hasn't fought since we broke him down. So I wasn't going to put the extra work in. He's well-rounded. He's a great athlete. He's a good, probably a great striker, high guard, a lot of variety in strikes. Good jab, his clean right hand. throws combinations, good tight pocket boxing. He kind of strikes by planting his feet and refusing to just back down. Like he just, okay, I'm gonna hold this ground. I'm gonna wait for you, and then I'm gonna throw punches, similar to Deiveson Figueiredo likes to do. I love his step in elbows. Like he'll get in close and just step in and throw an elbow. Good calf kicks. He's a good grappler. He can shoot without setting up sometimes. Like he could just shoot wildly. But he more shoots just to create a scramble where he wins a lot of scrambles. The how do I say his name? Mustayev fight.
Mustafayev, yeah.
Mustafayev, sorry, is a good example. Like he was winning scrambles. Now, the Alex Silva fight is probably a bad example where he actually was taken down sometimes. Now he still worked up to his feet and had some great scrambles, but I was surprised that he was taken down by Alex Silva. But good cardio too. Like he didn't slow down. That was what won him that fight, the Alex Silva fight. And I feel like a lot of people see that fight. It was like, wow, that fight was closer. I think it says more about Alex Silva than it says about Riddell. This is an incredible fight. I love both these guys. I expect both guys to be landing huge shots and good output. I'm going to take Riddell though. And this is my 5th upset now of the night already. And I'm just going to go because one, I think he might be slightly faster, but also if it's not going his way, he can go to his wrestling. I don't expect him to, but like I think he can win the stand-up. I know he can win the wrestling. So he's got 2 avenues of victory. I think Drew Dober only has 1. So give me Brad Riddell, another upset pick.
Wow, there you go. Yeah, I mean, this is my fight of the night pick because of the stylistic matchup. I mean, these two guys are both really exciting strikers, and neither of them is likely to want the fight to go to the ground except maybe as a desperation move or a safety valve. Like you mentioned, it's an available avenue for Brad Riddell. The thing I always have to remind myself about Drew Dober, and this is where I coined that term that I heard once from Jordan Breen. He looks wrestly. You see a stocky 5'8" guy from Nebraska with cauliflower ear, and you're like, oh, I bet that dude's a fucking wrestler. And then you're like, nope, not a wrestler.
I bet you he wrestled with Steven Peterson in Ohio.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, the original guy that he said that about was Nate Marquardt. Because you're like, oh, he's from Wyoming. He's got this gnarly cauliflower ear. He must be a great wrestler. He's like, no, his wrestling was always his weakness. He was a very slick grappler and a really hard hitter and a terrible wrestler. Yeah, Dober has turned some kind of corner. He's always been like a technically sound striker, but despite being built the way he is, he didn't seem to have knockout power at the UFC level. I mean, he knocked out like the ghost of Josh Berkman, but something changed, over the last year or two. And dude, Marco Polo Reyes, Nasrat Haqparast, and Alexander Hernandez are all good fighters. And a couple of them, he just clean, like, starched them. It wasn't even like an accumulation of damage. I like that power against Riddell. I'm not confident in the pick, but I'm gonna go with Dober to probably land the harder shots, especially early on. And I'm not picking a knockout here, but to do enough to like at least win the first 2 rounds just by doing more damage. And maybe Riddell does take the third. Maybe Riddell maybe I'm just dead wrong and he ends up outstriking Dober, but I'm not seeing it that way. Give me Drew Dober by decision in this one. We begin the main card of UFC 263 with a light heavyweight showdown between Paul Craig and Jamahal Hill. Craig, the 33-year-old Scot, is 14-4-1 overall. He is 6-4-1 in the UFC. Fought most recently last November at UFC 255, where he he pummeled the legendary Shogun Rua into tapping to strikes in the second round of their rematch. Depressing sight for all involved, except presumably Craig and his immediate family members. Anyway, he takes on Hill. The man who goes by Sweet Dreams is 30 years old. He is 8-0 with 1 no contest overall. He is 2-0 with one no contest since joining the UFC out of Dana White's Contender Series Season 3. Of course, that no contest was a highlight reel knockout of Klidson Abreu, which was later overturned when he tested positive for cannabis. Depending on how you feel about that, it certainly doesn't erase the visual memory of him winning his first 3 UFC bouts in pretty easy and straightforward fashion. Hill, a prohibitive favorite here, one of the bigger favorites on the card. He is minus 280. You can get Craig around plus 240 as the underdog. We were talking just in between segments here, off air, about why is this fight on the main card when you have a title eliminator, just 3 fights down the card from them in the form of Calderwood and Murphy. It's one of two things. I mean, the UFC's card ordering doesn't always make sense to us outsiders, but this is either going to be a get over fight for a guy in Hill that presumably they want to get over, or it's going to give another, highlight of the year type thing when Paul Craig pulls something unlikely out of his bag of tricks. Jamahal Hill, he is on the cusp of contention and stardom in a way that you very, very rarely see out of a fighter with fewer than 10 fights. By all rights, he should be 3-0 in the UFC right now, and kind of in that boat of people who got over last year, like, Kevin Holland, Khamzat Chimaev, Joaquin Buckley. He hit a little speed bump or a little weed bump, I guess. But he's a super fun guy to watch fight. Super athletic, long, really long striker. Lots of power. He's really active and entertaining to watch, but not completely wild. Like he's not quite Johnny Walker level, but he can be a kind of a tornado of like knockout power coming at you. And this is both a setup fight and a trap fight. It's a setup fight in that Paul Craig, for a guy who's, he's above 500 in the UFC, his weaknesses do not match up well with Hill's strengths. Like Craig is a minus athlete. Like he's a very big guy. He's almost always the bigger guy in his fights, but he's slow. Like he's one of those guys that's coming in last in the light heavyweight decathlon. I think of his striking as, he has reasonably good technique. He throws pretty straight punches. He will try to throw kicks, but his footwork is kind of poor, and it's made worse by the fact that he is slow of foot. He can look good striking against like the shell of Shogun Rua, but against a guy with the speed advantages of Hill, this is going to be a massacre on the feet. Craig's thing, of course, is he is the guy that pulls out the literal last second submission. His win over Magomed and Ankalaev is still one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. It took place with literally 1 second left in the fight. It's something he'll always have. But unless Hill does just something exceedingly stupid in this fight, this is his to win. Give me Jamahal Hill by a nasty highlight reel knockout on the feet in the first round.
Wow, calling the highlight reel. So you said that Paul Craig, he has a physically big light heavyweight. Like he's huge. He's 6'3". But you said he'd finish last in the decathlon. He's 6'3". Do you think he can slam dunk?
I don't know.
No, like if you had $500 on your hand and you had to make a bet, you could either bet that he slam dunks it or not. No. I'm betting no.
Like he might even have the hops to get it to the rim, but he'd like brick it off the off the rim or something. Like he would not be able to just cleanly dunk a basketball.
Sure, in fairness, he's from Scotland, which I don't know what the basketball scene in Scotland is like. But he, as you mentioned, he's physically big. But he doesn't have the power, like for someone who's, big light heavyweight. His chin is so high in the air; it's always ready to be cracked. Shogun Rua was still cracking him in like 2020. He even for a guy who's so big, he doesn't throw a lot of kicks. He doesn't throw good kicks. He throws a lot of kicks, but they're not good. Like he doesn't turn over his hips. He kind of just throws them out there. He throws them out there to get caught. It might be a strategy. He might be asked you to take him down because he wants to get to the front of the ground. But for a guy who wants to get to the front of the ground, he's not much of a wrestler. Like he he won't go in and he has to take it down. He'll find any way possible to get it, but it's like pulling guard if he has to. I mean, he pulled guard against Shogun, uh, and probably got a draw because of it. He has a submission threat. He can't get subs off your back. We talked about that, though. He plays BJJ too much to me. Like when he's losing the position, like against Shogun, he didn't like work back to his feet, and he isn't some elite grappler. Like it wouldn't really shock me, like not Jamahal Hill, but you know, I'd easily take probably 10 light heavyweights that I would take him in a straight jiu-jitsu match over him. And he's a, as we already mentioned, he's a terrible defensive wrestler. Now moving to Hill, I think Hill's one of the best strikers in the UFC already. He's southpaw, long and lengthy, uses his lengthy traits like we talked about last time. Works behind a stiff jab, straight punches down the pipe, teep kicks, step in knees, like all things you want a long and lengthy guy do. But also he's very accurate. He lands to the body. He rips the body with hard strikes, kicks to the body. He does keep his chin a little high in the air. He needs to fix that. He doesn't move his head that much. He's been rocked a little bit by pulling his head straight back. But I like that he initiates the clinch. I like that he will look for some wrestling takedowns himself, though he isn't a wrestler. And he has terrible takedown defense. I mean, Darko Stoysic took him down like 6 times, I think, in that fight. It might have been more than that. Though, even though he got taken down, he didn't stay down. Like he found little openings and scramble to get back to his feet. He threw up some submission attempts with his, long legs and that. I don't think he's going to be a submission threat in the UFC, but it's nice to see him have something down there. And he hasn't shown any gas tank issues for some guy who's so big. You were very high on Hill winning this. I feel the same way. I think Hill runs right through him. I think he's going to have to stop a takedown or stop a guard pull. But every second it's on the feet, Hill has a better chance of getting that knockout. I say Craig takes his chance on the feet, a little too confident with the Shogun fights, and Hill makes him pay for it. You said highlight reel knockout. I'm following you, man. I say also highlight reel knockout, Hill first round.
It's now time for the welterweights as 43-year-old living legend Demian Maia makes his return to the cage against Belal Muhammad. Maia, 28-10 overall, 22-10 in the UFC, a former title challenger in both the middleweight and welterweight divisions. He fought most recently last March, getting knocked out in half a round by Gilbert Burns, who was on his way to his own title shot, of course. That snapped a 3-fight winning streak over Lyman Good, Anthony Rocco Martin, and Ben Askren. Muhammad, the 32-year-old Chicago native, is 18-3 with 1 no contest overall. He is 9-3 with 1 no contest in the UFC. That no contest came in his most recent appearance just this past March in the headliner, the short notice headliner of UFC Fight Night Edwards versus Muhammad, where a fairly close and competitive first round came grinding to a halt 18 seconds into the second round when Muhammad received the last of several eye pokes in that fight, that final one rendering him unable to continue. He had been on a 4-fight winning streak before then and seems not to have lost too much of the momentum there, as he does get another big name in his next fight. Muhammad, strong favorite here, -230. You can get Maia at +190 if you fancy him as the underdog. I would fancy Maia as the underdog if he were not taking on someone as smart and well-rounded as Belal Muhammad. I think even at 43, even just, in clearly the final phase of his career, I don't think it would surprise anybody if he retired, after this, win or lose. I think he remains an underratedly dangerous guy. As his athleticism has, gone the way of the dinosaur, he's regressed back into being what he was in 2008, 2009, a very one-dimensional fighter. It became, like there were jokes in the forums and on, podcasts about, K1 Maia, but they were affectionate jokes because his striking actually became surprisingly effective there for a while. And then, of course, one of the most underratedly dangerous things about Maia throughout his career is he's always had an outstanding bag of tricks to get the fight to the ground, even against superior wrestlers on paper. those things are going away. I do not expect him to be able to hold his own against Belal Muhammad in a kickboxing match, and I don't think he's going to have a very easy time getting Muhammad to the ground, in the way that he, used to do to, like, the Chael Sonnens of the world. Again, there are still some people out there, even fringe contenders, that Maia could probably sneak up on right now, but Belal Muhammad is just, he's well-rounded. He's not bad anywhere. And he fights a smart fight and fights to his best advantage every time out. Like, I look at Muhammad over the last few years, and he's always kind of percolated right beneath the rankings. He's always lost one, just the absolute worst moment, and it's set him back, and he's had to go win 3 or 4 more in a row. That's the story of welterweight. But in his case, he has gotten beaten by fighters who are better at that time. Jeff Neal, Vicente Luque. It's never been that he just screwed the pooch and, like, fought a dumb fight. And him fighting a dumb fight I think that's the only way he loses to Maia here. Like, he'd have to do something stupid in the clinch and let Maia take his back standing or something in order to lose this fight. It probably won't be fun to watch. Maia is in the final stages of his career, one of the most legendarily nice guys in the history of the sport. But give me Belal Muhammad by unanimous decision.
Yeah, you said he's one of the nice guys in the sport. Like, I don't know anybody who's not a fan of David Maia, which is so funny for a guy who's known for his grappling. Like, that's usually not the case. Like, so, he's definitely not a lay and pray guy like some of the guys you get categorized. But just to be as popular as he is, liked by every MMA fan, is crazy. I mean, when Gilbert Burns knocked him out, he cried for beating a guy like David Maia, and he earned a title shot with that. Or I don't know if that was the fight, but was it the fight that got?
I think that was the one right before. Or no, was it Woodley?
Woodley?
It was Maia then Woodley.
Either way, at that point, it was the biggest win in his career, and he's crying. So Maia Southpaw, you mentioned the K1 Maia and all that. It was fun, but you're right. Why was it saying that? Because he was landing, especially that left straight. Now, it could be that he got pretty good at stand-up, or simply that his opponents were so worried about his grappling that they didn't focus on his fighting. Striking, and then suddenly like, oh yeah, I'm in a fight, and he's punching me in the face. One thing about he does, David Maia, is he uses forward movement, and he never takes a step back. He's always moving forward, and he's constantly taking ground and just creeping and creeping and creeping to get that, closing the distance without you even knowing he's doing it already, and then also forcing you to go back towards the cage. And he's so good at cutting off the cage. So he gets you like a little, like, trapped, animal, and then he's like that dog catcher that he just snags your neck and takes you away. He's got great entries. His single leg takedown is legendary, and the way he's kind of Jordan Levitt was trying to do a similar thing that David Maia does, not the same thing, but and you mentioned, like, those wrestlers that he's actually out wrestled. I mean, Ben Askren recently, he out wrestled, and I remember when he threw Chael Sonnen, and like, these are good wrestlers, and he might be the best grappler in MMA history. If not, he's, as we always say, he's getting in the club.
He's in the club.
Like, not only is he in the club, but he's getting like a VIP room. He's getting like some free champagne. If it's a private club, he's getting on the board. Like, come on. If he takes you down, he stays glued to you, both in the clinch or on the ground. He's a guy who is control position before submission. Even in his fight against Gilbert Burns, I mean, everyone remembers the knockout. He had Gilbert Burns back in that fight, like, early. Now, Gilbert Burns is also a extremely high elite level grappler that he was able to fight his way out of that. Obviously, David Maia's submission's right. I mean, he's one of the greatest submission artists of all time. Namuvo to Belal Muhammad, good movement. That's going to be a key. He's got to move, but he's got to move. He's got to circle. He can't move straight back. I would say he's a good striker, not a great striker. Like, I've heard people like really talking about his striking as something special. I don't see it special. Like, I think it's good. I think it's serviceable. I would say it's upper half of the welterweight division, or top 20, just pure striking in the division. So like, I'm not trying to trash him. Like, it's good. I'm surprised at how much people credit him. I think it's because he stays so composed. Like, he's very calm in there. He uses feints well. He works behind a jab. Good variety in his attacks. Will target the body. Likes his calf kicks, which he might not want to throw against Damian. He might want to throw any kicks against Damian Maia. Defensively, he uses head movement well, though he has been hurt a lot. He's been in a couple wars. He is a bit undersized. I think he's like a tween. He'll never fight at lightweight, but he's a little undersized for like him against Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman would tower over him. But while he's undersized, I'm surprised how effective he is with his wrestling. He's a very good wrestler. Great at just dropping down on his opponent's hits, timing it. Good back takes. So, and I love how you talked about, we talked about last time when we were breaking down Belal Muhammad versus Leon Edwards. You kept saying like how smart he is. I was saying like he's a thinker. Like, he comes up with a game plan and he executes it. So as far as the prediction goes, wait, did you hear that?
Nope.
No, you didn't hear that? Oh, that was the sound of an upset special coming through.
Whoa!
Everyone is writing Maia off. This guy's won 3 out of his last 4 fights. His last fight, he had the back of Gilbert Burns. I know. I was going to say, yeah, Muhammad has never been submitted before. He's also never faced Damian Maia before. Maia's going to do Maia stuff. He's going to back Muhammad up. He's going to take him down, and he's going to submit him. Give me Damian Maia to submit Belal Muhammad in round 2. My upset special.
Wow. Boldness. That is a ballsy pick, sir. Like, you took all the thinking and talking points I had, but you had the cojones to like actually make the call. And it might look really smart in a few days. I mean, yeah, Maia's lost 4 of his last 7, but they're against like literally the 4 best guys in the division over that time. It's like Usman, Covington, Woodley, and Burns. Like,
that's my 6th upset. Like, my picks might be my picks might be really bad this card.
So do you have Maia by submission?
Yeah, I took Maia by 2nd round submission.
Incredible, sir.
You know what? If I'm gonna have big balls, let's turn it to 1st round.
1st round. There we go. 3rd from the top of the UFC 263 pay-per-view main card. It is a welterweight scrap between Leon Edwards and Nate Diaz. Edwards, the 29-year-old from, I believe, Birmingham, is 18-3 with 1 no contest. He is 10-2 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is on a 9-fight unbeaten streak with 8 straight wins plus the no contest against Muhammad just a couple months ago. He will be taking on Diaz, the 36-year-old from Stockton, California, is 20-12 overall. He is 15-10 since winning the 5th season of The Ultimate Fighter. Fought most recently in November of 2019, losing by 3rd round or between 3rd and 4th round doctor stoppage after getting beaten up by Jorge Masvidal in a fight for a belt that the two of them basically spoke into existence. Masvidal went home with the BMF belt. Diaz went home for a little over a year and a half. He returns as the substantial underdog here. Edwards is minus 600 as the favorite. Diaz plus 450 on the comeback. Keith, what does Leon Edwards have to do to get a title shot in the UFC? And then tell me how you see this fight playing out.
I mean, he's got to talk about BMF and hang out in Miami and wear robes to event. I don't know. I mean, some of it is just bad timing. I mean, with COVID and shutting down, and I mean, it's sometimes just bad luck. But this is like turning Tony Ferguson, Tony Ferguson level of why can't this guy get a title fight? Leon Edwards, I mean, this dude is really good. You just watch him. Southpaw, he's on the feet. He's very accurate. The thing that jumps out to me of Leon Edwards is his footwork. He's light on his feet. He uses movement 2 ways. He uses movement to, 1, avoid shots, but also to place his himself in alignment for power shots. Like it's really a thing of beauty. Good feints. He's a good counter striker. Head movement is good. He's accurate. I wrote accurate twice, so that tells you what I think about his accuracy. He's got a very slip and rip style. Power is really coming along. Like I wouldn't say he's a power puncher for the division, but he can crack, and he's a good wrestler. I mean, we think of British fighters, and any of our listeners from Britain. I'm not trying to shit on you, but you guys know you're not wrestlers. That ain't the case with Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards is a good wrestler. And he loves to get in the clinch, body lock. Where when he won, he's a big welterweight. He just weigh you down, just outmuscle you. But he'll body lock you, take you down, smothering top control, good ground and pound. Now move over to Nate Diaz. I mean, Nate's Nate. Like, do I have to? Should I break down his skills? I mean, we know what it is. He's fun. I mean, he's got definitely a boxing style, good output. Constant pressure, constantly looking to take. We talked about Damian Maia taking ground. He's the same way with Nate Diaz. He's trying to constantly force you on your back foot to punch you. It's funny. His punches don't necessarily hurt you. I think they mentally break you when you have a guy like continually moving forward and swearing at you and walking with his hands down as you're trying to circle away from him, and he's still, he's barking at you. And he's spitting blood while he's still throwing punches at you. I think that mentally breaks people more than it physically breaks them. He obviously has this high guard to come at you. He's got this thing going, and he just touches. He's not trying to even, and he's touching you. Not that in the sense where he's touching you to try to win rounds. He's just trying to be busy, and then he'll unload big shots. His left hook being his best one. They use a lot of, both the Diaz brothers, but he uses a lot of hand fighting where he likes to grab the front hand, and he does it very similar to Conor, which is so funny when they fight each other. It's very intriguing, but they distract. Like Conor doesn't grab, but he more like does this thing going, and so he gets over to the left. Diaz he likes to grab. He likes to hand one to get your range, but also to set up his shots. But he doesn't have big power. Like he's not a big power guy. I mean, we talk about that. I mean, this is a guy that's fighting at welterweight that really was a former lightweight. He probably, if he took the MMA game serious, he'd probably be a lightweight. And he has no kicks at all. Like you'd never see Diaz throw a kick. Because of his high guard defense, he's wide open to body shots. He's also very heavy on his front foot, leaving open to leg kicks. That's one thing Conor did in the second fight. He was really targeting the leg kicks early on because of that heaviness. And I'm worried about his chin. I mean, I know that's kind of bold to say, being that I think he's only been knocked out once, if I recall, the Josh Thompson. Oh, I mean, in the doctor stoppage with Masvidal, the last one. But I mean, like, I think Josh Thompson is still the only one to knock him out. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you think about the power shots, that a guy like McGregor was landing on him. The last fight, Masvidal was beating his ass. And then besides the damage of the chin, it's just a scar tissue. I mean, he cuts in every single fight. His last fight was stopped from a cut. If he gets to the ground, he's decent. If he goes to the clinch, he's a good clinch battle. He likes to do trips in there. That's actually like it's a area that he has a lot of success people with. Not against Leon Edwards. He's not going to win the clinch against Leon Edwards. But if he gets you to the ground, he is he's not a good offensive wrestler. Like he's from the outside, from shooting on your hips. Like he can get some trips from the clinch, but he's not going to shoot on your hips and really take you down. And he's very weak defensively. He plays BJJ. He gets on bottom. He struggles to get back up. He'd rather just punch you from while laying on bottom. While he is a submission threat, I think it's really overrated. Like I don't think either Diaz brothers is as good as grapplers as people make them out to be. He can take a beating. In fairness, in the third round, he was actually having a decent round against Masvidal. When that between the third and fourth round was fight, the third round was one of his better rounds. I mean, he still was getting dominated in all three rounds. I know there's a lot of notes. I gave a lot of notes because let's be honest, there's going to be a whole bunch of people listening to this just going to scroll right to the Nate Diaz fight. To those people, listen, if you want to see Nate Diaz win, Like if you're a casual fan who knows Nate Diaz and you want him to win and you're gonna be very disappointed and you're gonna be pissed off and you don't want to waste your money, don't order this fight. Don't order this card. If you want to have fun with your friends and drink some beers and watch fights, yeah. And you're ordering it because you want to watch Nate Diaz, go for it because it's a fantastic card. But Leon Edwards is going to murder Nate Diaz. He is better than Nate Diaz everywhere. I expect this to be one of our nominations for beatdown of the year. It's not usual for Nate Diaz to be stopped. I expect Edwards to beat a piss out of him until the referee decides it's enough, it stops him. And I say that happens in the third round. Give me Leon Edwards in a fight that every single hardcore fan knows is going to happen. I shouldn't say every single. Obviously, I'm generalizing, but I mean, he's what, a negative 600 favor, whatever it is. You said. This will be the fight that we all knew it was coming, but now the rest of the world will find out how good Leon was, and then you can't deny him a title shot.
Yeah, and something I should have mentioned off the top, this, despite not being a title fight and not being a main event, is a 5-round fight. Like you, I don't think it gets there. Nate Diaz is, in most ways, the same fighter he was 10 years ago. You know, good, high-volume boxer, doesn't sit down on his punches, you know, like very much a pity-pat guy who wants to just land volume, frustrate you, you know, maybe hurt you or frustrate you / hurt you into shooting a bad takedown on him, and then you're in his world. I agree, like, very, very, you know, early 2000s elite grappling, you know, like, looks for submissions off his back, doesn't really care to sweep. But yeah, man, it's been 10 years since he out-grappled a good grappler. You already laid all the rest of the Diaz skill set out. I will tell you that, you know, you just mentioned, hey, some people are going to learn about Leon Edwards. I learned about Leon Edwards almost exactly 2 years ago from about 15 feet away when I watched him just put it on Rafael dos Anjos for 5 rounds. I had dos Anjos in that fight. You know, it was in San Antonio. I was covering it for SureDog. And Edwards was better everywhere. And he did Rafael dos Anjos things to Rafael dos Anjos, because dos Anjos was the grinder. I'm just gonna wear you out in the clinch. I'm gonna out wrestle you. You're gonna be surprised at how much pop there is in my boxing. And Edwards just broke him. And that was against Rafael dos Anjos. Nate's not going to be able to take that from him. He's still a tough guy, but you pointed out the main problem. Diaz is going to be bleeding from over the eyes by like 3 minutes into this fight. So that's going to factor into it. Edwards isn't going to need to bring this fight to the ground if he doesn't want to. And that's where, I mean, he would be in the most danger. Like, I highly favor Edwards in this, but if Diaz wins, it's most likely, you know, a sub from his back because Edwards got hurt or got, you know, sloppy. Edwards doesn't get hurt or get sloppy very often. I'm with you. I think Diaz probably does make it to the 3rd round, and it's stopped by the ref or stopped by the doctor just because he's a bloody mess and just getting walloped, kind of like the Masvidal fight. And yeah, then Edwards has a 10-fight unbeaten streak in the most merciless division in the UFC. And we'll see what the UFC wants him to do next before he gets a title shot. Does he have to fight 2 little people? Does he have to fight a shaved bear? Who knows? But yeah, Edwards big time. It's chicken to call a 6-1 favorite the lock of the night, but you know, I definitely say, you know, I'd put him in my parlay, like, and feel pretty comfortable about it.
Next fight would be Leon Edwards versus Lauren Murphy. Winner finally gets a title shot. And no, we're not advocating domestic violence or anything.
No, we're not. And I mean, if we were, like, you know, Derek Lewis already called her out a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
With that, we come to the co-main event of UFC 263. It is the first of 2 rematches for titles. This one for the UFC men's flyweight belt. It is Deiveson Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. Figueiredo, the 33-year-old Brazilian, is 20-1-1 overall. He is 9-1-1 in the UFC. fought most recently, of course, to a draw with Moreno, which we'll talk about in a moment. Previous to that, he had been on a 5-fight winning streak that brought him to the pinnacle of the division. Moreno, the 27-year-old Mexican, is 18-5-2 overall. He is 7-2-2 in the UFC, and previous to the draw with Figueiredo last December, had been on a 3-fight winning streak over Kai Kara-France, Jussier Formiga, and Brandon Royval. Odds on this one do favor the champ. He is minus 230. You can get Moreno at plus 190 or so as the underdog. It is unfair to Moreno in some ways, but in terms of him being in the flyweight picture and staying in the flyweight picture, title picture, the fact that he had a draw with Figueiredo and it was a fight of the year candidate last year, for all intents and purposes, he might as well have lost. Because if he beats Figueiredo on Saturday, they're going to probably do an immediate trilogy fight. If he loses to Figueiredo, he's going to go back to the back of the line and have to win quite a few fights in a row before anyone wants to see Figueiredo Moreno 3. So, yeah, it's great that he got a draw. It's great that he proved he belonged, at least for one night, at the pinnacle of the division. But for his own future career, like in my article this week, I said, like, this is kind of last chance for Brandon Moreno. For as long as Figueiredo is at the top of this division, like, this is his chance to do it. And the thing is, their first fight, I mean, it was a fantastic fight. It was a majority draw. I mean, so it was 2 drawn scorecards and 1 scorecard for Figueiredo. So I make of that what you will, but it was a majority draw. But the thing was booked on a 3-week turnaround for both men. You know, both of them fought, versus Alex Perez and Brandon Royval, I think it was. And then because a card 3 weeks down the road needed a headliner, you know, they agreed to fight each other in 3 weeks. That's going to be part of the story of this as well. Now, I'm going to leave aside the quick turnaround weight cut because that presumably affects both of them the same, even though, you know, Figueiredo obviously has a hard weight cut, and I figured that would hurt him. But, you know, they both had to make the same weight. Figueiredo claimed later that he had to be hospitalized with a stomach infection, like within the 24 hours before the fight. I don't know whether that's true. That's impossible to confirm or falsify, for me. What I do know is that short notice fights, short notice changes of opponent, they introduce chaos into the equation because it's 2 fighters who are less prepared for each other, and that always favors the underdog. If Figueiredo wins tonight, I think the narrative coming out of it is, well, Brandon Moreno was never a match for full camp Figgy. So there's a lot on the line for Brandon Moreno. And the thing is, I'm with all of that. I think Figueiredo is going to win this one more convincingly than he won the first one. Figueiredo, you've called him mean. Dana White has called him mean. I will finish out the trio and say Deiveson Figueiredo is mean. Lots of fighters scowl, like we just talked about Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz hasn't smiled in 15 years. Figueiredo he has a murderous look, and he comes forward and throws strikes, and it's not like he winds up and gets wild on stuff, but they all just have mean intentions on them. He doesn't put on a furious pace by flyweight standards. I think of him as more of a flyweight Jose Aldo, where he is capable of blindingly quick strikes and blindingly quick offense, but it's wait, burst. It is, I feel, more of his pace. The one thing he will throw out regularly are his kicks, but I think that's probably just what he's learned as a coping mechanism for being such a huge flyweight. He's like, okay, if I need 3-round, now 5-round cardio, this is how I get it, by managing my output. Moreno likes to fight at a more furious pace. He'll certainly try to impose that pace on Figueiredo. I don't think he's going to be able to do it. He thrives, in, wrestling / grappling scrambles. I don't think that's going to be a safe place for him against Figueiredo either. Just Moreno's a really good fighter, and he's still improving. I mean, he's still only 27 years old, but the things he's good at, just like, I think Figueiredo is going to be either impervious to them, or they just don't match up well with what Figueiredo does well. 2 days ago, I was picking Moreno to make it to the final horn. I'm not sure I am anymore. Give me Deiveson Figueiredo by fourth round. I'm going to say submission. Like, he's wearing him down. He's hurting him. Moreno is rung up, and they end up in one last scramble on the ground. Figueiredo takes the back, chokes him out.
Yeah. So before the card started, I said that my fight of the night pick was Riddell versus Dober. Yeah, what am I thinking? This is gonna be the fight of the night. So I'm changing my pick to fight of the night. It was a incredible fight on, as you mentioned, 3 weeks notice. I don't think we give these guys enough credit for not only putting on a fight of the year candidate, but doing that after they just did a full camp right before that, to put their bodies through that. It was absolutely incredible. I'll start with Figueiredo. Figueiredo is one of the fighters that fights, and he's really good in both stances. Is a great counter striker, uses feints to draw out his attacks, great head movement. He has slip and rip style where he slips in the pocket to land the better shot, where he doesn't necessarily slip to miss the punch. He slips to land his own. He's even willing to kind of eat a smaller punch to land one of his own bigger punches. He's also one of the best strikers in the entire UFC and entire MMA of landing punches while backing up. Like it's a very rare quality. There's Stipe Miocic, Chuck Liddell, these people that get credit. He's up there. Obviously, he's for flyweight. He's like the Mike Tyson at flyweight. He's got big power. His right hand is his money shot. He kind of reminds me of Wanderlei Silva, and I mean that as a compliment. Where he will sometimes he'll just. Brad Riddell does this too, but not what I was talking about earlier. He holds his ground and then just throws hard looping, wild shots. And he throws them from weird angles, so you don't see them coming. But when they connect, they really hurt you, and he just whips his whole body into him. He can be a little bit of a maniac at times, though. Like that. When I was saying that he holds his ground and throws wildly, that's not the maniac I'm talking about. Like, that's, even though it is, it's like I remember, and I wrote this down last time. I think it's the third time I wrote this down in my notes. Is the Pantoja fight, where he just sprinted at him to throw one punch. He ran full speed at him and threw a punch. Like, it was kind of like those videos you see of hey, go punch that guy, and the guy runs full speed and punches some guy not looking. Like, that's what it seemed like. He does make the mistake of keeping his hands low, his chin a little high. He can be hit. But what I love, and this is out of everything he does, I think this might be the thing I love most of him, is when he gets in close range, he can land elbows. He looks for elbows. He doesn't check leg kicks. He's very strong in the clinch. He's just, I mean, you look at him, he's a physically imposing flyweight. He's a good wrestler, nice reactionary double. I wrote down hard to take down, which really wasn't the case in his last fight against Brandon Moreno, which was, we'll get to Brandon Moreno, was so impressive of how good Brandon Moreno's wrestling looked. But when you take him down, he's very explosive to get back up. He has a submission threat, beautiful guillotines. That's kind of his go-to. We saw that in the Alex Perez fight. Tim Elliott's another one. I was really concerned in the last fight about his cardio being a 3-week turnaround. We said, obviously, it's equal for both guys. We both feel the same way, that it more likely have a bigger impact on Figueiredo. That wasn't the case. He was still, he slowed down a bit, as anybody should in 25 minutes, but he was still throwing hard heat in the 5th round. Now, move on to Moreno. Just what a well-rounded fighter is. Good boxer, fast hands. I said it last time, I'm going to go say it again. The Kai France fight, where he was just jabbing him, just worked him over with the jab. When he wants to throw power shots, he sits on his punches. Good kicks, especially his high kick. He has a Robert Whittaker style where he dips one way and throws the high kick on the other side, which is a nice thing to do, especially after you just kind of landed punches. They start thinking about your punches, dip that. It's a really beautiful boxing defense. He bobs and weaves. He's a very Bernard Hopkins style, shoulder roll game. So it's a lot of deflecting shots. He mixes punches and takedowns in well. I was really impressed with his, as I said again, I was really impressed with his wrestling against Figueiredo. Take Figueiredo down as much. Great in scrambles. We've seen him, with his Grammy rolls, and he got some slick back takes. If you try to hold him down, it's very hard to submit. So as far as prediction goes, one, I think the odds could be much closer. Like, I'm surprised that Figueiredo is a 2-1 favorite in a fight that was a draw last time they fought. But Moreno, to me, had his best fight with a bunch of takedowns that I did not expect, and I still think he lost. I didn't have it what most of the judges had at 48-47. I had it 48-46. I had 4 rounds to 1 for Figueiredo with the point deduction. And I was looking at MMA decision. So did you. So
Yep.
we both gave it for Figueiredo. To me, he just simply has more avenues to victory. He has the more power on the feet. He's the biggest submission game. I think he will show up his wrestling. I actually think wrestling could be an advantage for him, especially in the clinch if he can close a distance and kind of get some chest to chest positions. I think Figueiredo. I said it last time when he won the title. I think he's going to be the champion for a long time. This is probably going to be his stiffest test. And I think I think you made some really good points. One being that without a full camp, it should favor the less skilled guy, or the underdog, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a really, really good point. And I think your point about this being the pressures on Brandon Moreno, that like this is his last chance when Figueiredo's the champion.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really good point. And I never really thought about that. So back to the prediction. Give me Figueiredo by decision.
There you go. 2 picks in favor of and still for the God of War. With that, we come to the main event of UFC 263, a scheduled 5 rounds for the undisputed UFC middleweight title, a rematch nearly 4 years in the making between Israel Adesanya and Marvin Vettori. Adesanya, the champ, the 31-year-old Nigerian-born New Zealander, is 20-1 overall. He is 9-1 in the UFC. He is 9-0 in the UFC middleweight division, his lone loss having come in his attempt for 2-division glory back in March, where he challenged light heavyweight champ Jan Blachowicz and lost a unanimous decision. He takes on Vettori, the 27-year-old from northern Italy, is 17-4-1 overall. He is 7-2-1 in the UFC. He is on a 5-fight win streak. Those wins coming over Cesar Ferreira, Andrew Sanchez, Carl Roberson, Jack Hermanson, and most recently back in April at UFC on ABC2, Kevin Holland, whom he defeated by unanimous decision. Vettori and Adesanya, of course, have faced each other. That was back in April of 2018 at UFC on Fox, Poirier versus Gaethje. Adesanya won a split decision that night. Despite what Vettori would have you believe, he did not really win that fight. To most observers, it seemed to be a fairly straightforward 1 round for Vettori, 2 for Adesanya. But nonetheless, it's in the books as a splitter, and certainly it's provided plenty of fuel for the champ and challenger to yell at each other on video. Adesanya is a fairly strong favorite here. He is -250, -255. You can get Vettori as high as +220 as the underdog. Keith, I'm going to throw this one to you first, and I'm going to throw out kind of a general question with it as you break these guys and the fight down. Do you expect this to be like a fun and entertaining fight?
Yes. I'm always entertained by Adesanya, so yes. Like,
Okay.
I don't expect it to be two avenues where it could be. I don't think it's going to be a Adesanya Romero where they're staring at each other, and I don't think it's going to be a Marvin Vettori holding down Adesanya for huge long periods of time, which is the avenue where people who are predicting Vettori to win is saying.
Right. Okay.
As far as I think is going to win, guys, you've heard me. If you've ever listened to me talk about Adesanya, I've said it before. I think I said it last week. Adesanya is my absolute favorite fighter to watch film on. I think he's the best striker in MMA history. He is the guy that I feel like I learn something new every time I watch him. I mean, this guy's deadly in both stances, both orthodox or southpaw. Let me ask you a question. Like, what is he better at? Is he better orthodox or is he better southpaw?
I
Like that's my
I
point.
couldn't.
Like that's my
Yeah.
point. Like, that's how good he is. Like, is he a southpaw? Is he orthodox? Like, he's so good in both stances. Um, he's long and lengthy. He knows how to use that. He's a master of distance. He's so calm and poised. He's got he has good speed, but that's not what makes him deadly. What makes him deadly is how accurate he is with that speed. And he's so intelligent. We talked about Belal Muhammad being a thinker. You can see him thinking as he's fighting, especially on the feet. He's setting up traps. I love studying guys, but when I study him, I have no clue what he's trying to do. Like, he's that good. Like, and not that I'm like some striking mastermind, but I mean, like, I rewatch, I stop, I pause, I rewatch, and I can't see how he set that punch up. It's just he's just incredible. He feints with his hands and his feet. His feints, absolutely, as I said this last time, he absolutely frees his opponents with it. He's got the best vision in maybe all of MMA. Like, he has moments where he just enters the matrix. I mean, you think about the Paulo Costa knockout, the Robert Whitaker knockout, the Derek Brunson knockout. He's moving at a speed that is just like he puts everyone in slow motion. Great head movement. He blends punches and kicks well together. Can throw kicks everywhere. I keep talking about that question mark kick. He's going to hurt someone with it soon. He has power simply because of his, not from his physique, but on his placement where he pushes things. He's good in the clinch. Has some trip takedowns in there. Obviously, his defensive wrestling is a big concern. It was one that I stopped feeling concerned about, but the Blachowicz fight is the one that'll bring you back out. In fairness, Blachowicz was much bigger than Adesanya. Adesanya was way, I don't know, it was like 190 pounds fighting at 205, before the rehydration. The size difference between Blachowicz and Adesanya was huge. That says Vettori did keep him down, and he struggled to get back up. Move over to Vettori. Vettori, I was thinking about this when you were breaking down the Figueiredo fight. Vettori seems like he needs MMA. And you know these guys say, like, oh, MMA saved my life. Like, I feel like, and I don't really know his personal life that much. He just seems like he needed MMA, because if he wasn't an MMA fighter, like, Vettori seems like the guy that would have a shirt on way too small, sitting at a bar, and then trying to fight some dude because he grazed up against my shoulder as we went to the bathroom, or he made eye contact with my girlfriend and didn't look down at the floor when she walked by him. Like, that seems like the guy. He just seems like that guy.
Dude, he needs this. Can you imagine him being like your waiter or something, and you like send something back to the kitchen? Like, yeah, he has the temperament for.
Yeah. Yeah, I asked for onion rings, not French fries, and he just like slams the basket over your head. And you know what though? I'm not trying to trash him. Like, don't change. Like, be like I've said this before. Like, we need personalities in MMA. Like, be like short-tempered, roid rage in a second. I'm not saying he's on roids. I'm just using an example. Like, in a second, guy. He's a scary dude. He's just a physically imposing. I mean, you just look at him. He just looks like a muscle, like a big muscle. On the feet, he's aggressive, pocket boxer, a lot of shoulder. It's kind of like a theme. I think there's a third fighter on this card which is not a common thing in MMA, but he likes to use shoulder rolls with his head movement. He tends to lend. He likes to use shoulder rolls because it also sets up his counters, which is power hooks. He kind of loads up your power hooks. He can be a little left-hand happy. He'll throw that power left a little too much, and he can drop his hands, which I don't think he'll do that against Adesanya. The thing about him at this age, and I said this last time we worked him, I feel, and we didn't see this in the last fight, but I still think it could be there. I feel like he might just be coming into his power. Like, I feel like we might start seeing, because he's not the power hitter that his physique says it should be. Now, I know people say, oh, dude, you can't just look at the beach muscles. I know it's why I was talking about Adesanya. Like, I understand that. Like, but for his technical sound, his pocket boxing, I feel like he's going to have that Drew Dober moment where suddenly he is, just landing a shot and putting guys out. Good body kicks, strong clinch fighter, good entries. A very underrated wrestler for. I should say this: he's not underrated heading into this fight because suddenly everyone wants to talk about his wrestling, but like for his career, like no one's talking about him as this big wrestler, and then you're like, oh wow, like Italian dude actually can wrestle, and he's solid on top, and oh he's a submission threat. Like where did this come from? And the other thing I like heading into a title fight that he has gone 25 minutes. Like that was a good notch to have, like his ability to go 25 minutes. So as far as the prediction goes, since this fight was announced, I just kept thinking of like a scene from like Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan, or just some like war movie, and I think about like the sniper up in the tower, up in the the clock house in Germany or something like that, in like a Band of Brothers scene, and I think like the only way you can get close enough to throw the grenade in and explode them, which is like that's what Vettori can do, is land one of those big grenades, big shots, kind of similar to Paulo Costa. We were saying, is you have to like come, it's that moment where they have to rush down, the alleyway, the street, and that's when they start getting picked off. Well, that works good. I mean, it's extremely dangerous, obviously, and people die. And obviously, I'm not trying to make light of a serious situation, but that works really good when you have 30 guys running and he doesn't have time to hit everybody. That's a suicide mission if it's one person running. And unfortunately for Marvin Vettori, he's only one person. I feel like he needs to rush to get the clinch. He needs to get in there. And I don't think he's going to get the chance. I think Adesanya is going to snipe him. I think he's going to be landing shots. I think he's going to use his movement. I think he's going to be landing kicks, calf kicks, teep kicks, maybe that question mark kick, all the tools he has. And I think he's going to make it through the first round. And in the second round, he's going to pressure. We've seen what Adesanya does with pressure. Derek Brunson tried rushing him, put him out. Robert Whittaker, one of the biggest negatives about Robert Whittaker is his ego of trying to, I have to land a shot back if I got hit, and then that's when Adesanya punches out. I feel it's going to be the same way with Vettori. He's going to run. I mean, Costa, another guy. Well, I forget that. He rushed in and got knocked out. I think Vettori's going to rush in, and he's going to get sniped out. Give me Adesanya, and this is my lock of the night. Israel Adesanya by second round TKO. By TKO. I think he's going to put him out cold.
I love a lot of what you put out there, and I love that you mentioned Adesanya's vision. His ability to just throw his strike where his opponent's going to be, and his opponent's going to be there because a lot of time he put him there. Because it's not that he looks blindingly fast, but you can tell his opponents look slow to him. It's like he's seeing the fight in like Matrix bullet time. I mean, the crazy thing about him is that it's not just that, he's like outclassed, everybody on the feet. He's outclassed very good strikers on the feet. Like Paulo Costa and Robert Whittaker are guys that we thought of as very good strikers. And he sees their flaws, he sees their tiny mistakes, and just capitalizes on them just so beautifully and so effortlessly. Obviously, as soon as this fight was announced, my immediate gut was, yeah, well, okay, Adesanya. Like both guys have improved, but the ways in which Vettori has improved don't matter. I think he's a much better and more composed striker than he was, a few years ago. But that doesn't matter. Like, you're not going to outstrike Israel Adesanya, but because that's what my gut said, I start going, okay, if Vettori beats Adesanya, what does it look like? Who are the people that have beaten Adesanya or at least given him a hard time? And really, it's Blachowicz, it's Vettori himself in their first fight, and it's Kelvin Gastelum. Blachowicz, weighing 225 pounds on fight night is not something Vettori can do. So that one's kind of out. But, Vettori took Adesanya down and won a round by controlling him. Gastelum, I mean, he tried for the takedown, didn't get a lot of them, but he made Adesanya think about the takedown enough that I think he landed more clean offense on him on the feet than any of his other UFC opponents, even people we think of as much better strikers than Gastelum. If Vettori beats Adesanya, I think it's because he tries for the takedown persistently. And even if he doesn't get them or doesn't get them early on, it throws off Adesanya. Because if all Adesanya has to worry about is your striking, again, he's going to go matrix on you. He's going to figure out what you're doing wrong and kill you. But yeah, I'm not picking it to happen. You know, this is a bad matchup for Vettori. Like, you know, he seems physically, you know, stronger. He's probably even a better wrestler. You know, he's one of the, you know, best. Well, he's probably the best MMA wrestler we've ever seen from Italy because he moved to LA so early. Yeah, I mean, he's been at King's MMA for most of his UFC career. You know, even our Italian correspondent Tudor Leonte, it's like more Italian fighters should do that. But no, I'm with you, and it's tough for me to pick something to happen that I've never seen happen before, because not only has Vettori never been finished, he's never even really been very badly hurt, at least in his UFC losses. But yeah, I mean, Adesanya is just going to chew him up. This is a bad matchup for him. I'm going to say he makes it to the third round, but all that 5-round fight experience isn't going to matter because, yeah, Adesanya is going to start rolling downhill on him after about 6 or 7 minutes, and we're probably going to get, you know, some kind of highlight reel finish. So yeah, Adesanya by third round knockout. That is it for the marathon Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 263, Adesanya versus Vettori 2. 14 fights up, 14 fights down. Enjoy your week. Certainly, you know, tune in for these fights and check us out either on the Sherdog front page or just directly on the Sherdog YouTube page, as Keith and I will be doing the live recap. We will be taking your questions, comments, your takes on things via the live chat section, and we'll just be talking about all these 14 fights and what they mean for the future. Between now and then, again, enjoy the fights, and thank you for listening. For Keith Schillen, I'm Ben Duffy.